Welcome back. Today we have a special edition of the Brewer Fanatic podcast. I'm Spencer Michaelis, joined today by Alex Robbins, who runs the BrewersFarm account on Instagram and on Twitter. Alex, first of all, thanks for joining me. Second, how are you doing? And then can you tell the listeners maybe a little bit about yourself, your background, and a little bit about BrewersFarm as well?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you, Spencer, for having me. This is my first time doing a podcast, so I'll just say, anybody out there listening, just bear with me. It might be a little rough the first time. But yeah, my name is Alex Robbins, run the BrewerFarm accounts. A little bit about myself, born and raised near Milwaukee, Hartford, Wisconsin. No longer in Wisconsin. I'm still in the Midwest, but played college baseball, NAIA ball. So basically Division II level. And then, yeah, just always been, a Brewer super fan. And Spencer, as you know, you get to a certain point where you're just like, watching the major league team and following the big league club. It just doesn't quite quench your thirst and you kind of need something more. And so I got to a certain point, it was probably 2014, 2015, that I really kind of dove into the minor league system, began just kind of following the games every day, started to know all the minor league players, and it's kind of quenched that thirst a little bit. And so since that time, I've kind of been doing this. It was just for myself for a long time, and then COVID hit 2020, and I was just sitting in my apartment. All my college classes were online, couldn't really go out and do anything. So I'm just like, I wonder if there's a way I can kind of materialize this interest and passion. And, if I get, any sort of a following, that's just kind of a bonus, but it was just kind of for me. And it's just been awesome seeing it kind of grow. Obviously it's nothing too major, but we've developed a good following, and I'm so incredibly thankful for the people that follow along, and for the players and coaches and staff that have kind of embraced it and allowed me to reach out to them and just have conversations, get to know them a little bit. And it's just allowed me some opportunities that I wouldn't have had otherwise. Got to throw out the first pitch at a Brewers game last year they're playing the Cubs. So that was a pretty cool atmosphere. Brewers reached out to me about that. So, yeah, just thankful for where it's taken me and just trying to have fun with it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I started following along on the Instagram page pretty early on, and yeah, it's been very cool to watch the growth and to see, like you said, I mean, you see players reposting all your stuff and interacting, and that's super cool. I mean, I was in a very similar spot timeline wise to when I really started outwardly publicly talking about the prospect stuff. I was similar in that I guess it probably is almost the exact same timeline, honestly, because it was my sophomore, junior year of high school. I started getting up to Appleton for a few games. My dad would go up with me and we'd just stay in a hotel for like a series and just watch 3 games up there over the weekend. And then I just started following those guys. And then I was kind of getting into, okay, I can follow all these other affiliates and start to watch them. And MiLB TV was not what it is now at that time. So actually watching games was a lot more difficult and a lot harder to find. So you got very rare opportunities to watch them. But as the minor league stuff started to grow on that side, I also started to really start to embrace it. And in all honesty, when I first started posting stuff on Twitter about Brewers prospects, I was like, no one's going to care about this. Like, this is just for me. I'm just going to post it because this is what I'm paying attention to, and maybe a few people appreciate it. And it's been cool to just see people. It's helped that the Brewer system has certainly gone from where it used to be to where it is now, and people are really embracing having the Jesus Medes of the world and Jackson Churios and those guys coming through. But yeah, it's a very similar timeline for me where right around COVID is when I was like, you know what? My college career ended because of COVID after a week in my senior year. So I was like, you know what? I need baseball. I'm going to follow anything I can with everything with Brewers baseball. And yeah, it just kind of went from there. So that's cool. I think we're in a similar spot for sure in terms of like the way this all went down. So just to give listeners an idea of what we're planning on here, our hope is to make this potentially a monthly podcast. We both were too busy to make it work in April. We're doubling up in May, so we're going to see if we can make this work monthly. If not, we'll certainly do something more along the lines of we're at about the 1/3 point of the season right now. We'll probably, if we can't make it monthly, do something. My guess would be around the All-Star break of the big league season. That would be about 2/3 of the way through the season, and then try and do something after. I don't know exactly how it's going to work out, but that's kind of the thought process right now on the way this is going to go. But for this one, we're mostly just going to kind of talk about who's off to good starts, who's maybe not off to a great start that might be a little bit surprising, some pleasant surprises, some guys that maybe came from off the radar a little bit to have a really solid start to this season, the first 2 months. We'll also talk about some guys who maybe got hot in May, didn't start super well in April, since we're covering 2 months. But that's the way we're going to go through it. We're going to start in the Arizona Complex League. The ACL Brewers are currently 10-11. I think they're starting a game right this moment. So by the end of the recording, it might be a different record. But for now, we're going to start with some guys who are hot on the ACL side of things. And I think the first name we have to talk about is Alexander Frias, a name that had definitely caught some attention at the end of the DSL season after missing part of the early part of the season last year with some injuries. A big, tall, strong dude who is a pretty good athlete with a huge arm. What do you know about Frias? What have you, I know ACL, we aren't watching games necessarily, but what have you seen from him? What are you seeing from Frias early on?
Well, I knew I was impressed with the numbers in the DSL last year. Didn't necessarily show the power that I know is in there last year. He dealt with some injuries. It wasn't a full season last year for him, but I really went back and forth. For those of you that don't know, and maybe at the end I'll talk a little bit more about my account, because I know there's going to be listeners out there that might not have even heard of my account. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But I really went back and forth in my preseason rankings, and I was debating about, if he was going to be ahead of Antunes. And I think at least at this point, he's kind of my guy in that trio of him, Antunes, and Fenelon. Just the power is pretty incredible. He's going to develop into more of it. He showed it a little bit so far this year, but the exit velos are just insane. I've seen him get up. He's approaching 120 at times. I've seen, I think, 118 a couple of times. But like you said, he's got that cannon of an arm. And I'll talk about him a little bit more, because we're going to talk about, I think at the end, some people that I'm particularly high on. I think there's a lot more in the tank, and he's just starting to gain that attention. Even, I'm putting him up there in terms of his power and his bat, like it's special, like it's Made it's Made and Churio special, I think. And, it's going to take some time. I think there's more development there than what Made and Churio had. But once he hits that, he's just going to take off. And I see possibly a top 50 prospect in baseball someday.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of what you saw early on from Hendry Mendez before he got hurt, but with a lot more pop in the actual exit velocities. Like Mendez was popping some decent EVs back then, but it was more like maybe breaking 108, 109 as a teenager, which is still impressive. But when you're talking the 117s, the 118s, he's popping, and some 114s, and these are some are on the ground, some are legitimately well hit, doubles, homers. The raw power there is as big as anybody in the entire system. And as we go through this whole breakdown, we're going to talk about a lot of guys who have that type of raw power, but are also striking out at a really high rate. And Frias does not fit that description. He's striking out only 17% of the time early this year. It's a high ground ball rate. That is where he's going to have to figure out some of the timing, I'm guessing. I'm sure there's a little bit of looking at the bat path. It's pretty downward plane, so it's pretty hard to time it up and actually get the ball in the air regularly with that type of swing right now. But that's where Mendez was. And if you've seen anything with Mendez lately with the Twins organization in AAA, he's probably on the edge of a big league call-up. But again, Frias is a teenager in the ACL, just mashing. It's a 1167 OPS right now. There is a ton to like here. So yeah, I'm with you, and we'll circle back to a couple of these guys later on too, but this is a really, really exciting bat. And with the arm and right, I think defensively it sounds like there's probably some stuff to clean up, but that's not shocking at his age. The arm's going to help make up for some of that. It's a really, really fun profile, and I'm with you. I think the ceiling is about as high as any of the probably non-Madej Pena grouping in the entire system, just in terms of pure ceilings. So CJ Hughes is another one I want to talk about here. And like I just mentioned, somebody who coming into the season not really expected to have much power has shown it quite a bit more early on. Definitely has put on some good weight, looks a lot stronger than he did at draft time. I think he's a pretty good defensive shortstop. That was a big reason I thought the Brewers would be interested in him at draft time. The surprising part for me so far has been the 40% strikeout rate, but the power has been there. What do you know about Hughes? What are you seeing from him early on?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is kind of what you'd hope for out of a high school pick that you have high hopes for. I mean, he's showing that there's a lot of development that needs to be made, striking out at a high clip, but he's got the speed. I think he's going to be a good defender. He's shown impressive power. It's definitely more than what I was expecting at this point in time. And he's drawing some walks too. So I think if you could go into the season and say, this is where I want him to be at, 20 games into his professional career, I think he's exactly where he needs to be. I think he's going to spend most of the year in the ACL, which is, just fine. And as he continues to develop, I think the Brewers might have found something. Obviously got to work on some things, but the talent is there, and I'm pretty high on Hughes at this point.
Yeah, it's to a lesser degree, but it gives me a little bit of the Braylon Payne feels, just given what we saw from Payne shortly after being drafted, where it was like, okay, he's apparently going to be more of a slappy, put the ball in play type of hitter, and all of a sudden he shows up in Carolina at the time and is popping 110s, and you're not expecting that at all from Braylon Payne shortly after the draft, and that's a little bit what it feels like with Hughes. But this is a switch hitting shortstop who has I agree with you. I think he has a pretty decent chance to stick at short. So yeah, it's probably going to be a longer development road than we saw from Payne, who very quickly obviously went to low A and then spent a whole season there last year at the same time that Hughes is at right now in his development. But it gives me some of those vibes, and obviously we'll get to Payne a little bit later, but he's having a very, very good season in high A right now. The strikeouts, the whiff are down at least a bit this year, and I think that's what you're going to have to see the improvement from on Hughes. But you also have to wonder, when a guy suddenly adds power and really hasn't ever been a power hitter, learning when to go after the power and when to just understand that, okay, it's not the time to be selling out for that pop. Like the first time I ever hit a home run in a game, I was awful the next week after that because I just wanted to hit a home run every time I came up again. And I can see that happening with young players, like a guy who's not expecting to really have much pop, all of a sudden is showing it. Maybe he gets a little bit outside of his normal approach. We'll have to watch it the rest of the season, but definitely a very fun start for him. You mentioned Kenny Fenelon. He's another guy who the strikeouts are pretty high, 37% right now, but he's also got 4 homers. He has a 948 OPS in the ACL, and it's been a nice little jump for him. Now, the strikeouts in the DSL were in a solid place last year. They weren't bad. But he was a below average hitter for the level, technically, at a 95 WRC plus. Right now, he's at 130. Seeing the power in games, there are strikeouts, but the speed's there. There have been solid reports of his defense at times. What do you know about him? Is this something where you think he's made some steps this season as well?
I do, and I think it just shows it's testament to the organization. They were high on these trio of DSL outfielders from last year, and to bring them up when they've obviously held some guys back for a repeat sometimes, but to bring them all up as well as Acosta, I think it shows what they believe out of these three. And I think Fenelon has got all the tools. He's got the power and the speed. It's a common theme that these strikeouts are an issue for these young guys, and I think it's to be expected. But he's very raw. He's going to take time to develop. I think Frias is going to be more on the expedited timeline as opposed to Fenelon and possibly Antunes. I think Frias will move a lot quicker once he starts to figure out a couple of things. I think he's close to possibly moving up to single A. But the other two, they're raw. There's things to work on, and it's going to take time. But I think what they've shown, especially with kind of an aggressive promotion from their struggles in the DSL, I think it's promising. And I think it's just something to watch.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have Braylon Antunes on here, mostly because he's kind of just been okay so far. There's been some really nice flashes. He's hit some absolute bombs, but he's also had too many strikeouts himself. The overall production's not at the level of Frias or Fenelon, but in terms of like pure swings, that is my favorite swing of this group. Like, it is a really, really nice looking short swing that does a lot of damage without looking like he's trying to. And at his age, that's always impressive. That always makes me wonder a little bit where the strikeouts are actually coming from. It's probably a swing decision thing for him more than anything else, because just the path and the ease of which he swings would make me think whiffs wouldn't be a huge issue. But it does seem like he's obviously had some problems with it early on. But yeah, I mean, of that trio, I think Frias is definitely furthest along, but all three are definitely very interesting. Definitely some guys that we'll have to keep an eye on moving forward. You mentioned some guys who had to repeat the DSL in the past. The next guy on the list would fit that, Jonathan Rangel. It hasn't been a huge sample so far this season. This is a guy who his first season spent his time at basically a couple infield spots. Last year in the DSL, they moved him to catcher and actually got him quite a few reps at catcher. He's caught a little bit this year in the ACL. But the early small sample results, he's got 2 homers. He's got a double in 51 plate appearances. It's a 148 WRC plus. He draws walks quite often at both levels he's been at so far. There's been a lot of walks. What do you know about Rangel? I don't honestly know a ton. Do you know if catcher looks like something that's an actual possibility for him? Is it just something they wanted to give him the opportunity to do it with the build that he has? Because I think first base is probably where he ends up on the defensive spectrum if he doesn't end up a catcher. What do you know about Rangel?
Yeah, I think Rangel, I think they're going to continue to explore having him behind the plate. I think obviously the organization heavily values, being able to play multiple positions. Look at like Malachi Halterman, who was a shortstop in high school. He came in, they signed him. I think they wanted him as an outfielder, and he's been behind the dish as well. But Rangel, I don't see him sticking behind the plate. I hope I'm wrong. But, as long as he can fill in back there, possibly be a backup option, that provides value in itself. But I look at him and I see probably a first baseman, and he's really going to have to hit. And honestly, he's hit, even though he repeated the DSL, he held his own in his pro debut season. But they held him back, and his bat kind of took off repeating last year. And he's come over, and he really hasn't missed a beat. I've been impressed, but like I said, he's going to have to really hit if he's going to be limited to first base long term. I hope he can stick behind the dish, but I think if anything, it's just going to be a backup kind of second tier catcher on the roster if he does stick behind there.
Yeah, the Wes Clark route, if you will.
Yep.
Dustin Mayorkin is going to be the first pitcher we'll talk about here, and the overall numbers aren't anything crazy right now. It's a 4.8 ERA. It's a 4.11 FIP, so that's in a better place. The strikeout to walk ratio is in a good place, not quite the 7 that it was at in the DSL, but 4.3 is a really solid place still. he's getting a ton of whiff in the Statcast games that he's pitched in on everything except the four seam, which isn't shocking. But the curveball, the slider, the changeup, all of them, those are combining for nearly a 40% whiff rate, just those three pitches. And that's in a sample of 191 total and over 100 pitches. So like those pitches are getting a lot of whiff. I think I saw some video in spring of the fastball being up to 94 and even 95 a couple times. We have not seen that in the ACL. I think that's something where if he can get there more consistently, then it gets really, really interesting because the shape of the fastball is not bad. It's a high release. It's got 18 inches of carry on the induced vertical break, which is a good place to be, but it's not getting much whiff and it's not performing very well. It's really the one thing that's been getting hit on top of everything else. So what do you know about Mayorkin? Do you know he had a great season in the DSL? He's having a solid start in the ACL. He still, to me, feels like one of the guys who could move to low A relatively quickly, but I guess what do you have on him? What are your thoughts with Mayorkin?
Yeah, the numbers don't jump off the page at this point, but anytime you have a guy this young coming over from the DSL, you kind of expect there to be an adjustment period. And I think the way he's handled it has been outstanding so far. I mean, he's been one of the bright spots. There haven't been many bright spots in the ACL on the pitching side of things so far this year. But I should mention that before yesterday, he was 14-1 strikeout to walk. So yesterday was a little bit outside the ordinary. He struck out 3 and he walked 3. So I think the command still sets him apart from a lot of other guys. I think he could be a prime candidate to reach single A by the end of the year. I've been high on him. I'm always interested to see who kind of takes a step and makes a name for themselves in the DSL, because obviously this organization typically doesn't go after the big time international arms. So it's always kind of just who's going to take that step forward and set themselves apart. And he did that last year, and so far this year it's been good, and I think he's going to continue to get better. The command is a level above the other international arms that are on the roster, and he's got the stuff that if he really puts it all together, he could be something special, which is a lot to say because international arms in the system typically aren't at this level. I know you've been high on Mayorkin for a while, and I'm right there with you.
Yeah, he's pretty easily my favorite that came over from the DSL this year. There are a couple interesting arms that came over, and we're going to hit on one of them in a minute here, but he is one that I really like. Just watching the delivery, I do wonder if he's getting the most out of his lower half right now, which might be where some of that velo could come in later on. But I am definitely a big fan of his. Mikhail Holden is going to be the last guy we'll talk about in the Who's Hot section here for the ACL. This one, the peripherals don't quite back up what the overall numbers are saying for him, and that's mainly because the walks have been far too high so far. But he's got a 2.04 ERA with a 4.92 FIP. So the walk rate is over 16%. The strikeout rate's at 24%, which is solid. He's striking out a batter an inning. More than anything, this is, to me, somebody that I was really interested in seeing how this stuff played at the level. The four seam has played okay. I like the shape of it from the arm angle he's throwing, so I think it's going to be better. My guess is there's been some command issues with that pitch. The most impressive part for me is that he has legitimate separation between the slider and the curveball shapes, which a lot of high school arms blend those together. They don't necessarily have different velocity. They don't necessarily have different shapes. He definitely does, and he throws a pretty decent looking changeup as well. So I think it's a real 4-pitch mix. He's been up to 96, but mostly like 93 in most starts, and then it goes down a little bit as the outing has progressed. But in terms of the overall results have been good. He hasn't given up any homers. He really hasn't given up much slug in general. I really like the stuff. And if he can throw enough strikes, I think that's where you're going to find an interesting guy. But for a recently drafted high school arm, I think it's been a really exciting start for him, kind of along the lines of what we talked about with Hughes and Fenelon, where it's like in their case, the strikeouts are the concern right now. In his case, the walks are the concern on the pitching side. But it's a really encouraging start in a lot of ways. What do you think about Holden?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the common theme of pitching in the organization this year is the walk rate is just far too high throughout the organization. But just a lot of what you said, I've been very impressed with the pitch shapes. The velocity is there. I mean, I think he can obviously add more, still a young guy. But this is where Milwaukee and baseball ops and scouting kind of sets themselves apart because they find these guys, late round draft picks, guys that are either undervalued or kind of sneak by other organizations, and they develop them into legitimate prospects. And I think that's what they're doing here. He's going to take time. He's not nearly as far advanced as we saw other guys like Noth and Message and some of the other prep arms we've seen in recent years. But yeah, I'm a fan. I think if you can bring down the walks a little bit, he could be, a legitimate. I mean, I'm looking at him right now. I think if he takes that next step, he's a borderline top 30 guy next year for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he has some, in terms of like the shapes and everything, it reminds me a little bit of Jayden Dubanewicz, who we'll talk about later, who's off to a really, really good start this year. And he had a velo jump this year. We'll see if Holden maybe has a jump, or maybe he gets to the point where it's holding the 93 to 94 instead of being there early and starts and then kind of slipping as it goes. But yeah, no, I think there's that type of potential in there. He was a two-way in high school. He was probably going to two-way in college. So I think there's also an element of he's learning how to really pitch for the first time rather than focusing on two different things. I always find true two-way players super interesting when they want to, in pro ball, move to the mound. I think that's how you get a guy like Brody Hopkins, who's in the Rays system, who was a two-way in college, and guys like that who, like, they're just really good athletes, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing on the mound yet. And then you have the opportunity to actually get them on a mound, work with them regularly in that role. And I think that could be a little bit of what's happening with Holden. So I think it's been a good, interesting start for a lot of names in the ACL, probably more than we would normally see this early on. But there have been a couple that have maybe been a little bit, not disappointing, but they're not performing up to what you had hoped early on. Lefty Yohan Pena, who came over from the DSL, I'm going to kind of lump him together with Jayden Dubanewicz, the couple pitchers here. But for Dubanewicz specifically, he's also, his walks have been a really big issue early on. He's walking 13 per 9. It's a 26% walk rate. The whiff has been there. The strikeouts have been there. I think the stuff is pretty good, but obviously just, I don't think there's too much more to say other than he's going to need to throw more strikes. Pena had a really good season in the DSL last year. The strikeouts weren't huge, and that always did give me a little bit of pause. I wasn't completely sure on the velo. I was pretty sure watching video that it was in like the upper 80s, and that is what it has turned out to be. It's kind of in that 86 to 88 range for the most part. He'll touch 90 every once in a while. For Yohan Pena, the curveball is a pretty solid looking pitch, but it's thrown in the low 70s right now because of how he just generally to me, everything with Pena comes down to, can he add some velo across the board? I think that's what it's going to take for him. The walks have been a lot higher than I would have expected, but I also have a feeling that's tied to the fact that if he's in the zone too often, he's getting hit. So he's probably starting to nibble a little bit more. So between those two, both of them, whatever you want to talk about, but Dubanewicz and Yohan Pena, what are your thoughts on them?
I'm even going to throw in Dariel Jaquez. All three of these guys were in the very back portion of my preseason top 100 prospects in the organization. I think some of the issue is what you said about when they've been in the zone, they've gotten hit and hit hard. And I think that's caused them to be wary of working in the zone, and they're kind of trying to work the edges and kind of be cute with it because the confidence isn't there for them right now. And I think, the only thing that can kind of overcome that is by, getting in the zone and putting your stuff up against, who you're going against, because all three of these guys have the stuff. I'm confident in them, but it's been rough so far. And I think for Vucinovic, I think there's quite a bit of work to be done on his mechanics and his delivery. I think sometimes they work against them. It's not very smooth in my in my eyes, and I think sometimes he has some trouble repeating where he needs to be. So I think, obviously, I'm not the expert. You probably know more than I do in terms of that kind of stuff. But yeah, I think each one of these three has the potential, and they've shown it in the past, whether it's in the DSL or in prep ball. But it's kind of just the common theme in the organization is we need to get in the zone, force them to hit the ball, because when they put the ball in play, you're not doing yourself any favors by giving them the free base. So we're going to talk a lot about that as we go. Just the walks in the organization are too high, and these three guys are no exception, unfortunately.
Yeah. Haka's had a really good DSL season in 2024. He missed all of 2025. But yeah, the walks have been really high. At the same time, I looked at his stuff and like he's touched 98.9 miles per hour in game this year. He's got a really good looking changeup slider combo. But yeah, right now, if I were putting a command grade on it, it'd be a 20 on the 80 scale. Like it's all over the place. If you look at any of the charts, and obviously the walks, but also it really is about just throwing the ball over the plate more often. I think he'll probably get the results he's looking for if he can do that. Yeah, and the other two, I agree with you on Vucinovic. I don't think it's the cleanest operation. I think he's a really good athlete. That's the type of guy, again, you can kind of figure that stuff out with. But for now, there's a long road of development ahead for all three of them. The only position player we have in this group is Christopher Acosta. You mentioned him earlier. It wasn't a very good offensive season in DSL last year. He was kind of signed as more of a glove first type of guy to begin with. And that came through when I watched the video. He was one that, as much as I hate to say it, like I just didn't really see it with him right away. It hasn't really worked out. He did hit his first homer at the ACL level the other day. But I think it gives me kind of the Kevin Ero vibes from a couple of years ago where they just missed on one, and it's gonna happen. Like they hit on a lot of DSL players, a lot of international players, and sometimes you miss. And given the timeline that you're working on when you sign these kids, and we can talk about that more later, but it can be difficult to do it, and sometimes you're just gonna miss. So I think that's where I'm at with Acosta. I don't know if you have anything else you'd want to add on that.
No, I mean I hold out hope for all these guys. I mean, we've seen guys that have struggled, and they make an adjustment. Coaching staff helps them with something, and it clicks and they take off. So I'm never gonna put it past them that they're gonna turn things around. But Acosta was one of the, I guess, the four that they brought over, despite any DSL concerns or struggle. They kind of aggressively promoted him with the three outfielders, and I'm right there with you. He'll draw a walk, but at this point in time, he's just not making enough contact and not making enough quality contact. So hopefully in the June or July edition, we'll have some more positive things to say about him.
Yeah, agreed. We got a couple of pleasant surprises. I would put them under. And honestly, they're not huge surprises. These are two guys who repeated the DSL last year. Juan Martinez and Moises Polanco. I think both were pretty interesting coming into the season, but the starts they've had in the ACL have definitely caught my eye. In Martinez's case, it's the fact that he's striking out an 8% clip and showing some extra base power with 5 doubles and 12 for 12 on stolen bases, like an impressive showing in terms of the bat to ball, the speed, and the overall just solid offensive work. Nothing crazy, but pretty good. And then Polanco's doing similarly in terms of he's only struck out 3% of the time, and he's walking at a 23.5% clip, which is absurd.
That's
Again,
not bad.
especially considering, especially considering what we just talked about with all these guys. Like, it's insane that he's putting up those types of numbers. He did just get placed on the IL at the end of this past week, and Polanco turned 19 today, I believe, the day we're recording on Saturday. So these are younger guys who repeated the DSL, but showing some really good things. What do you have on Martinez and Polanco?
Well, and like I said with Rangel, they repeated the DSL despite, I wouldn't say they even struggled in their pro debuts, but they took that next step, repeating the DSL, and they were two of the best hitters at the level last year. So I think I've been higher on the duo than most. Both of them made my preseason top 100 in the 70 to 80 range. I don't know if we'll see any power from either of them. That's kind of I think that's kind of the separator. We've seen these guys before that get on base, make contact. They've got speed, and I feel like they get to single A or high A, and that kind of limits them if they can't tap into some power. So if they could develop some measurable power, that'll really help them cement their status as a true prospect. But for now, I'm happy with how they performed. I think they're underrated for me at this point, and excited to see some more. Hopefully Polanco's not out for too long.
Yeah, agreed. On the topic of guys who needed to show a little bit of power, I think Juan Ortuño kind of would have fit that mold, and this will move us into the Warbirds section here. But I mentioned we'd have some guys who have just had really strong starts to the season, and some guys who had some struggles in April and then had really strong Mays. That would be Juan Ortuño and Brady Ebel to a T. But starting with Ortuño, like we're talking a 79 WRC plus, 613 OPS in April, but now an 894 OPS in May, 144 WRC plus. He had his first two full season homers in the same game, had quite a few extra base hits this month in general. He was a guy that Baseball America mentioned as from 2024 in the DSL, he had a max exit velo of 99, which is really, really low. But he upped it to 109 last year. And the 90th percentile EV went up like 7 miles per hour as well to about 102. So this is a guy who has added some of that power, the power that he was going to need to add. What do you have on Ortuño? And what have you seen? Have you seen anything that necessarily changed from April to May, or just the guy kind of settling in at the level in his first full season at low A?
Yeah, Ortuño has been a guy that I've been high on since his days in the DSL. I mean, he was in the league with Made and Pena, and he was producing right up there alongside them. He even was outperforming them in some metrics. But yeah, like you said, I'm not sure. It was nice to see the multi-home run game. I don't know if we'll get any consistent power there, but excellent plate discipline. I had him as my number 34 prospect each of the last 2 years. Performed well in limited time last year, but he missed a lot of the season with some shoulder inflammation, I believe. But I think, and another thing that I'll add is a great part of my account is sometimes I do get some insight into what's going on with different players or at different levels. And obviously we've seen Major League Baseball implementing different things at different levels over the past few years. And, I've heard whispers that there was some stuff going on in A-ball. And so we've seen, oddly enough, a lot of our offensive metrics go in the positive direction. And we've seen a lot of our pitching metrics go in the opposite direction in the month of May. So I'm kind of fascinated to see, what could be behind that. But, a lot of this lineup was hitting under the Mendoza line in April. And a lot of them had strong months of May. So, there might be something to that. Ebel, Ortuño, Encarnacion all had strong months. But yeah, I'm high on Ortuño. I hope he can continue to tap into some more power. I want to hold off on my answer for that until I see a little bit more. But yeah, I've always been high on him, and I think he could be a bright spot in that lineup this year.
Yeah, agreed. How about Ebel? Similarly, a really, really strong May, even stronger May. He went from a 69 WRC plus in April to a 159 so far in May, and also showing, I would say, more legitimate power than what Ortuño has shown, just because there's been a lot of doubles. The homers haven't been as tight together. I think they're more legitimate. So what are you seeing from Ebel at this point?
I was honestly very concerned a month ago at this time. Wasn't showing any power, and kind of just blended into the lineup. Wasn't an offensive threat at all. But I know the organization is incredibly high on him. He had a great month. He's starting to show power. He's got a lot of speed. Got a patient approach at the plate. I think he could maybe even benefit from being a little bit more aggressive. Might help him tap into more power consistently. But I think he's going to continue this trend that he's been on the past month. I think he's going to have a strong season, and we might see him in Wisconsin at the end of the year.
Yeah, I was with you. It was concerning throughout April, especially because he did get a taste of low A at the end of last season. It wasn't like it was his first experience at the level. But May has definitely, I mean, I feel very good about where he's at right now. The other thing about him is, he's 18 for 18 on stolen bases. He's not a burner by any means, but you can see that he grew up around Major League Baseball. The instincts and like the IQ that he plays with are at a very different level than what you're used to seeing in low A, especially from a teenager. It does give me some lefty Cooper Pratt vibes when you watch him. I think he handles shortstop a lot better than people were giving him credit for. And I felt the same way when Pratt was in the low levels, where everyone was like, well, he's pretty big. I think he probably ends up moving off of it. And it just, when I watch it, I'm like, I don't necessarily see that with either of them. And I don't know if Ebel's at the same level I thought Pratt was at that point, but he is not somebody I'm moving off of short until it kind of is a necessity later in his, maybe at the upper levels, you start to see, okay, there are just better options, or maybe he needs to learn some other positions. But that's a guy I think can stick at short. And like I said, just the instinctual way he plays, some of the stolen bases he's had where he gets huge jumps because he's just reading a pitcher at a different level than other people are. And in terms of the swing, you can tell he's a guy who had a lot of conversations with Corey Seager growing up. It's not the exact same way that Seager does things, but if you look at it and you start thinking about Corey Seager, like, yeah, there's a lot of Corey Seager influence there. So I'm excited about him. I honestly wasn't huge on the pick at the time. The start to the season had me pretty concerned, although I was at the same time still seeing those instincts and seeing the stolen bases. And when he was on base, like, things were going well for him. But now seeing him tap into the power, seeing him do some of the other stuff, I think they've got a pretty good one here. I'm going to be really interested to follow, and I would love to see him get that jump to high A at some point later in the year, because I think he's somebody who's not going to move crazy fast as a high schooler, but I think he's somebody who can move at a pretty decent pace, kind of like we saw with a guy like Pratt, kind of going just under a year per level, basically, is kind of been the trend for that. Like, I could see him taking that road. And then you mentioned Handelfree Encarnacion. He's already surpassed his career high in homers. He's at 6 homers at this point. He's got an 806 OPS, 120 WRC plus, a few triples, a couple doubles. He's been okay in the outfield. I wouldn't say he's been great, but he's doing solid work defensively, better than what we saw when he first got to Carolina last year, I would say. Decent arm, not super fast. He's not had much success stealing bases in the minors so far. He's 10 for 15 this year. He was 6 for 12 last year. He was 4 for 7 the year before. So these aren't really the types of success rates that you would want to see, but I really like Encarnacion's swing, and I really like the way he plays. He's just got a lot of energy. He's probably the best bat flipper in the lower levels of the minors in the entire organization. He gave like a Yasmani Grandal-esque bat drop on one of them which I hadn't seen since Grandal was on the Brewers. It's my favorite way to pimp a homer. But he's a guy that I'm really high on. I'm really excited to see him adjust to the level. What do you have on Encarnacion?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I had him as my number 31 prospect entering the year. I don't think he's not going to be a stolen base guy. I just don't see it. But the power is legit. Some of the exit velos are pretty impressive as well. Another guy that he's been drawing plenty of walks this year. Swing and misses there. But I think as he continues to mature, like we see with a lot of these young guys, the strikeouts will come down, at least marginally. Walks, I don't know if the walks even need to go up, but we'll see. I think we'll see the batting average start to go up. He's going to be making better contact more frequently. And I'm pretty high on him. I think I see a 20-plus home run guy if everything goes right.
Yeah, I agree with that. We got a couple pitchers to talk about on this side. Jayden Dubanewicz, he has been, as I mentioned earlier, he's been up to 97.8 in game this season. He's kind of sitting around 95. First of all, shout out to Myrtle Beach, because that is my favorite camera angle I've ever watched minor league games on. They are killing it. It's right behind the pitcher. It's like the Brewers AmFam Field camera view, and they also have velo on the score bug. If you can give me that, I'll watch every minor league game you can give me with that type of angle and velocity, because it is a pain trying to get velo sometimes from these games. But watching his last start, Dubanowicz was sitting 95, a lot of 96 in there, a couple 97s. As he got into his third inning, he's still stretching out, coming off an early season injury. Saw a couple 93s, a 92. But for the most part, it's holding until he clearly is getting tired. And right now that's because he's not built up. But sitting 95 with 7 feet of extension, which he's also added. I wrote about it on Brewer Fanatic, I guess that came out yesterday, I think, on Friday. But he's got, 7 feet of extension. He's raised his arm angle like 15 degrees this year, and he's getting better shapes on all his pitches. He's throwing harder, and he just looks like he is in a much, much better place than he was last year. And that was already a solid start to his career. So what have you seen from Dubanowicz early on? Is this a guy that has legitimate, like, upper tier of the system pitching potential?
I believe so. Yep. And I will say, I'll preface it by saying that I am biased, because Jayden's been one of the most open guys to my account. Frequently interacting with him, just seems like just a great guy. So I am a little biased, but I do think he's right up there. And I will also say, like, he's not in Wilson for long. He's going to be with the Timber Rattlers very soon. I just view this as kind of an extended rehab as he continues to progress. He's going to start working a little bit deeper into games as he gets going. And, the Rattlers could really use him right now. I'll just say that. But yeah, I like the stuff. I think he's going to continue to develop. I think he's going to add velo. I mean, he's got the frame for it. Probably he's got some room to add some weight, obviously, which will help with the velo. And the stuff is definitely there. I'm excited to see, how his development continues to go. And I hesitate a little bit, but I think he's got the kind of stuff where if he puts it all together, we could be talking him like in the same conversation as we say, like Bishop Letson, which obviously he struggled quite a bit this year. But he's got some of the best stuff in the system when he's on. And I think Dubanowicz is right there with him if he continues to go on the track that I see him.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. That's actually who I was thinking of more and more as I went through writing that article for Fanatic. It was like, okay, that it's not quite the Letson extension, but everything else about the entire profile is starting to trend closer to what Letson does, and very projectable still, like you said. Carlos Cara is a name that I was really high on coming into the year as a sleeper. Awful April for him. You mentioned at this level, like, there were a lot of pitchers who kind of started pretty well and haven't had very good Mays. Cara's the opposite. Really rough start for him. And then in May, he's gone 21 1/3. He's got a 3.38 ERA with a 3.33 FIP. The WHIP is under 1. He's got a strikeout to walk of 18.8%, which is pretty solid, especially given where he started. The walk rate's under 10% this month after a really rough start in that department. And really, that was what it was. The walks were way up, and this was a guy who has not had walk issues at all in his career. In fact, that's been a really strong point of what he's done. In May, this looks like the guy I was expecting to see. He's more of a 93, 94 on the fastball guy, but I love all of the secondaries. He's throwing a cutter this year that I don't necessarily know if he was breaking out last year. It's a deep pitch mix. It's a young guy who's now performing in low A as again, very young for the level. This is still a guy that I'm super high on. I think that he's going to climb his way up the rankings at some point here if he continues to pitch anywhere near what he's doing right now in May. I don't know what your thoughts are on Kara, but he's one of my underrated guys in the system.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's another guy that's a prime candidate to add some velocity as he continues to mature. But Spencer, as a pitching coach, can you believe that limiting walks actually helps your performance?
I would have never guessed.
I've got him. Let's see. So I've got March and April. He was at 16 walks in 15 1/3 innings. Somebody might have to double check my math, but he had 8 walks and 21 1/3 in May. And magically the numbers all turned in his favor. So no, I'm excited to see if he can continue this trend that he's on this month. I'm high on him as well. And I think the Brewers have something. Obviously, international arms are an area that I think the organization, it's one of the few areas that we could maybe improve a little bit. I think they could go after maybe some of those bigger name international arms, but that's just not where their focus is. But every once in a while they come across kind of a diamond in the rough, and I think Kara could be one of those.
Yeah, I agree. We've got one more name, and this one's probably the iffiest of the ones I put on here, but Rylan Mills. He's got a homer and 2 doubles in his first 26 plate appearances at this level. He hit 2 homers, a double, and a triple in 24 plate appearances in the ACL and got moved up very quickly. The strikeout rate was very low in that tiny ACL sample. It's very high in this small sample at low A. But this is a catcher that I know the Brewers were pretty high on after the draft. They were pretty pleased with what they saw defensively after not necessarily knowing what they were going to get defensively from him as a catcher. Watching him, there's a lot of room for growth in that regard. He's receiving wise, he really struggles on low pitches. I've noticed the glove dropping quite a bit when he's going after those. And I think he gets himself kind of stuck at times and can't quite move side to side how you would want to, but it's a big guy, a good athlete with a lot of pop in the bat. I don't know that the numbers in low A are actually jumping out into the point where I should put this, but I'm kind of including the ACL numbers too. It's been a really interesting start, and the fact that they moved him to low A pretty quickly, I think, is also interesting, right?
Yeah, I think it shows the confidence they have in him. I was kind of expecting him to be very raw, and he's exceeded my expectations to this point. He's going to have the power. Exit velos are strong. Plate discipline, swing and miss hasn't been too overly concerning, but I do expect him, especially as he gets into full season ball. I think there's going to be a lot of adjustments to make for a young guy like Mills, and I wouldn't be surprised if he does struggle overall this year. And honestly, I'm not going to be too concerned about it, just because it was extremely aggressive to promote him this early, and he's handled his own in a very small sample so far. But there's been more swing and miss in A ball, and just like I said, I think it's going to be an adjustment kind of year for him, kind of as he matures. And just my advice is just don't overreact to seeing some struggles from him, because it's going to take time, both behind the dish and at the plate.
Yep, agreed. we've got three bats that maybe haven't gotten off to very good starts at this point: Jose Anderson, Filippo Dituri, and Frederi Montero. Montero was one that I had heard some pretty good stuff on from the ACL last year. I like his swing when I watch it. There's been 4 homers, but the overall strikeout rate and whiff rates are both in like the 32% range. And he just hasn't impacted the ball as well as I would have hoped. Now, the homers are his first, I believe, professional homers of his career. He hadn't shown over the fence power much in his career. He'd been a lot of hard, low contact. So I do wonder if there's maybe an adjustment to trying to get into some actual lift that's causing some of the other issues here for him. I've watched a lot of Warbirds games. He played a lot of third last year in the ACL and some first. He's very uncomfortable at first base. It does not look comfortable at all. I don't think he knows how to stretch correctly. He's kind of borderline dropped some balls, or at least some balls he definitely should have come up with over there. So that's a work in progress too. Dituri, unfortunately, we're at basically year 3 at this level. It just doesn't seem like it's coming together. It's a 35% whiff rate, even though the strikeout rate isn't terrible at 24%. I think that's more indicative of the types of swings I've seen as the whiff rate. It's not been great. For me, this is one that I hate to say it like this, but I just never really saw it when I would watch him. People had him, even like Fangraphs, Baseball America, everyone started kind of putting him in their rankings. And for me, he was like a back end of the top 100 type guy when I'd watch him. And that was kind of even just basing it off of some potential. So I'm not feeling great about Dituri at this point. I think he's probably kind of getting to the edge of, he's just a utility guy that fills kind of the roster depth in the minors. And then Jose Anderson, he's got 10 home runs. He also is whiffing 44% of the time, 42% strikeout rate. It's an 82 WRC plus. Like he plays a solid center field. He's a good athlete for his size, especially. But it's just too much whiff, right? I mean, is that kind of where you're at on these three?
Yeah, I'll kind of run through them here quick. So starting with Anderson, I mean, yeah, obviously the power is there. It's always been there. We knew kind of what hitter he was at this point. But, we've seen guys like this in the past. I don't know why, but I think of like Joe Gray Jr. And Gray was able to make adjustments for a while, figured out some things at single A, moved up to high A, had hot stretches, and then it kind of fizzled out for him. So Anderson is still incredibly young. He's got the tools, still very raw, but nothing's going to happen until the swing and miss comes down. Dituri, I'm just going to kind of repeat what you said, but it's a guy I had in the back half of my top 100 for a number of years now. I think he peaked at like 53 for me a couple years ago. I was pleasantly surprised. He started to show some more pop last year, and that's disappeared this year. He's still drawing walks, but like you said, at this point in time, it just looks like a utility piece. So hopefully he can figure it out. I'm leaving out hope for all these guys. And then Frederi Montero, I had him at 99 coming into this year on my top 100, just because there are so many questions with him. Honestly, if I had to give my opinion at this point, I'd say maybe I am a little pleasantly surprised, even because he has started to show some of the power. There's swing and miss concern there. My questions coming into the year were like, I don't see where his defensive home is. He was a first base, third base guy. I thought he would probably end up at first base, obviously. And like you said, it looks kind of uncomfortable there. So I don't know. If you're limited to first base, and then especially if you're limited to DH, you've really got to mash, and he hasn't so far. Trended a little bit. Power in May was down a little bit, so I was going to say he was trending in the right direction in terms of the batting average, but the power kind of disappeared again. But I'm interested to keep an eye on him. He's the one that I'm kind of fascinated with, because I don't know. I don't know what to make of
Yeah.
him. I'm probably most hopeful for Anderson still, most fascinated by Montero, and I feel the most bad for Deturi at this point. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with all three of those. The only pitcher we had in this category, and as you kind of noted, like May hasn't been great for a good chunk of guys. I'll mention Jarrett Bonnet because we were going to originally have him in the pleasant surprises when I first started writing this, and then last couple outings have not gone very well, and the overall numbers are now not very good. So we didn't put him in here, but that is a guy that I'm actually very interested in still, just watching him. There's a lot of 95 to 97 in there in terms of the velo for a 19-year-old who was a JUCO undrafted free agent. He might be 20 now, but either way, it's a young arm who I am very interested in. He's not in here at all, but that's one I'm going to be keeping an eye on as we go. And I wouldn't be shocked if at some point we dig a little deeper into him in a later check-in. But Anderson Mercado is the guy we have in this section. The walk rate is up quite a bit. It's at 15%. There's still decent amount of whiff. He's getting a lot of ground balls, but there's also been a lot more loud contact this year, and he is not putting players away. Like the whiff, I mentioned 30% whiff rate, solid, but the 22% strikeout rate means he's just not able to finish guys off very well with a strikeout. What are you seeing from Mercado? I think the stuff is interesting, but to me, this is just kind of one of those arms that's like, yeah, he's fine. He can make appearances in the lower levels, but I'm not sure if there's a ton there moving forward.
Yeah, so Mercado, for those of the listeners that don't follow my account, also before the season, in addition to my top 100, I put out a list of 10 names that I'm interested that didn't make my list, and Mercado was one of them, because he's got some interesting swing and miss and some interesting characteristics that I wanted to follow. But at this point in time, I see him as sort of like an Anthony Flores, who I don't know if we're going to talk about later on. I don't think we are, but just a guy that probably going to move to long relief, and I think he could benefit from that. Just like the theme of the day, got to bring down the walks.
Yep. Agreed. We got a couple lefty arms out of the bullpen that I think would qualify as pleasant surprises so far this year, in Anthony Reyes and Jose Meneses. Two guys who have had major walk issues in the past, and both of them have lowered the walk rate significantly this year. What do you have on those two?
Yeah, Meneses was admittedly not on my radar coming into the year. He's had major struggles at pretty much every level coming into the year, but he's been one of the most pleasant surprises in the system. And then Anthony Reyes, he actually made my preseason top 100 for a couple of years, and then I left him out last year. I'd have to go back and look at the numbers. I can't remember my reasoning, but I think it was centered around the free passes. And so both of them have performed pretty well, I think, especially with the state of the Rattlers bullpen. Was Reyes just put on the IL? Do you know?
He was, yeah.
Was. I was going to say, I expect one of these two, if not both, to make their way up to high A in relatively short order. But yeah, they've both been pleasant surprises. Hopefully they can continue to keep the walks down or bring them down even more. But yeah, it's just kind of a couple nice, fun stories start of the year.
Yeah, Reyes dropped the walk rate from 18.7 to 8.4 this year, striking out 37% of batters. And then Meneses, he has 32 strikeouts in 24 innings, only 9 walks, 59% ground ball rate, 2.25 ERA. He's up to 98, sitting 95, 96 on the fastball from the left side with a slider in the mid-80s. He's very interesting. I agree. I think he's healthy. He's probably the one who gets the first shot in Wisconsin, but Reyes also has spent the most time at low A, so if he does get healthy himself, he'll probably be there in short order too. But yeah, two very pleasant surprises. That Reyes, again, like you, he had fallen off my radar, Meneses, I just always kind of looked at and been like, okay, he's walking like 20% of hitters. It just doesn't matter. But it is probably a good lesson in, if the Brewers aren't releasing somebody who has those types of issues for numerous seasons, there's something there. Like, they are very interested in something, and they believe it's eventually going to click. And it probably doesn't usually, but this might be a case of it actually clicking. And then we have Pedro Ibargüen in here. I want to leave him because I know we're going to talk about him a little bit later too, but he was the other one in the pleasant surprise group for the Warbirds. So we'll move to Wisconsin, and the who's hot is going to be almost all position players, because the hitting, the offensive output in Wisconsin has been very, very good. Josh Adamczewski, I don't think there's any surprise. Most people who follow this system are going to know all the names we're going to talk about here pretty well, I think. But Josh Adamczewski, he's got 7 homers already. He's got 8 doubles, a triple, 154 WRC plus. He just slipped under 1,000 on the OPS to 999 at this moment, but 8 for 9 on steals. We did get our first question from Sprawl 135, who asked, Josh Adamczewski just made the Baseball America Top 100. How real is the power outburst? So you want to take that one first?
Yeah, for sure. I think the power outburst is real, but I'll caveat that by saying I don't think he needs to be like a 25 home run guy to be valuable. Like, I think he's got one of the most pure approaches at the plate that I've seen in the system. Might be my personal favorite, honestly, in terms of who I want to watch when they're hitting. But just a very balanced approach. Not concerned about the swing and miss. I know there's a little bit there, but I mean, anytime you're drawing as many walks as you're striking out, I'm not going to be concerned about it.
Yeah.
I think there is potential for 20 plus homers, but that's not what excites me in particular about him. It's just the all around approach, and I think he's got a natural feel for hitting that's unlike most, if not anybody else in the system.
Yeah, it's one of the most pure swings I've seen at any point in the Brewers system, and to combine that with a really good approach is how you get this type of output. Like, it's been a really, really solid season for him. This was a guy who very quickly on, after being drafted, like, you could just see the swing was really good. He's hit at every level along the way. The guy is just a pure hitter, and I would argue he's the best pure hitter in the system. I mean, even including a guy like Midday at the top. Like, the ceiling's higher for a guy like Midday, but the current version of Adamczewski, I think, is the best pure hitter in the entire system. So I think the power is real. I don't think it's ever going to be huge power like you. The exit velocities aren't insane. They're above average, and they're definitely above average for his age. But they're nothing crazy. But he's a guy who's going to maximize where he hits the ball. He'll probably be a guy who maximizes kind of the pull side power, especially as he starts to get a little bit older and more mature, and even grow from where he already is in his approach. Yeah, this is a really, really good hitter who has honestly looked the part in left field so far too, which has been a pleasant surprise because I really didn't know how that would look. I don't think he's perfect out there, but I would say it's looked a lot better and more comfortable than I was expecting. So playing left field, the bat's going to have to be there. The good news is I think it will be.
That's what I was going to add, is I've been pleasantly surprised with seeing him in left field. I think that's obviously been the main question mark with him, is where is he going to end up defensively? And if he can continue to get comfortable out there and become an average defender, if not, slightly above average, then he'll be kind of a total package in my eyes.
Yeah. I am with you 100%. I mentioned Braylon Payne earlier. It's been, speaking of power breakouts, it has been a power breakout for him for sure. 10 homers, 8 doubles, still a 35% whiff rate, which is a lot higher than you'd like to see it. The strikeout rate's in a better place. It's under 28% this year, which is good to see. I think when you have a guy that's as talented and athletic and powerful as Payne, you can live with some strikeout. There's a point of no return where it gets to be a concern. But if he can live under 30% moving up through the system, I think it's going to play pretty well. Overall, it's been really impressive stuff. He's only 9 of 13 on steals, which isn't a great ratio for a guy with his type of speed, but it's also not a huge sample. If he steals successfully the next 3 times, it'll look fine. So defensively in center, I think definitely improvement. Given his athleticism, there are plays he can make that very few can make. He's not like a Luis Lara level defender where it's not perfect jumps right now. It's not necessarily the greatest routes. But again, with all of the talent he has, it's making strides, and he is just unbelievably athletic. He'll get to stuff that people, even taking better routes, aren't going to get to out there. So what are your thoughts on Payne? Is this a legitimate step forward, breakout for you, or what are you looking at in terms of the whiff? Is that going to be still a little too much of a concern? Where are you at with Payne this year?
Yeah, where my head's at with Payne is just, in my eyes, I don't think the development could have gone better for him at this point and for the organization. I mean, the whiff rate, is elevated, and it's going to be there. And in my eyes, I think, you give him an aggressive promotion to single A last year, and he holds his own. He shows some development with some power. And then another aggressive promotion to high A this year, continues to show more power. I think they're going to continue to be aggressive. I'd say, continue following the plan most of this year in high A, and then either at the end of the year or start of next year in double A. He'll continue to show some development. There'll still be some swing and miss. Same thing with triple A, same thing with the big leagues. And then once you've continued to reach that level and you can settle in a little bit, that's when you'll see him really mature as a hitter, and the whiff rate will come down. I think as long as they're aggressive, there's going to be whiff when they're promoting him at this early stage, and it doesn't concern me at this point, because I think as long as he continues to develop and hold his own with each level, that's all you can really ask for him. And in terms of the stolen base, I know he's had some lower body issues this year. He had some calf stuff going on. I think there might have been a little bit of hamstring injuries in there that he's just been playing through. So I'm not really concerned about the stolen bases at this point. I think once he gets healthy, and that might take a little while if he continues to play. I know he's been sitting out, and it might be a lower half thing, and that might be why he's missed some games here. But the stolen bases will come back. He's got the speed. He's got plenty of speed, and the power has been great. I'm not concerned about him at all. I think it's been a very impressive showing for me.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I will say the next guy we're going to talk about, I'm a little bit more concerned about the whiff, and that's Andrew Fisher. The overall numbers have been absolutely fantastic. 151 WRC plus. He's got a 1030 OPS. He's got 14 homers, leads the Midwest League, but a 37% whiff rate and a 33% strikeout rate for a college hitter in high A. That part does worry me. Now, again, the overall production is hard to argue with. It does make me laugh and also sort of annoy me when every time I post a highlight, everyone's like, he should be their starting third baseman in the big leagues right now. And I'm like, he's striking out 33% of the time against high A pitching right now, guys. Like, that would not translate to the big leagues. And I understand he had a great spring. He had a really good WBC. There's a ton to like about Andrew Fisher. And I almost feel like people are forcing me to like be more negative about Andrew Fisher than I want to be. But this does concern me a little bit. Now, it's trended better of late, but it also is just kind of been up and down throughout the whole season, and it's not really necessary. Like, there's been some nice stretches where there's not much whiff, but then there's also been stretches where there's a ton of whiff. I'm hoping that's not a sign of things to come, because the honest truth is that if this is this big of an issue in high A and it doesn't get better, it is hard for me to envision a legitimate future for him at the big league level. And that's not to say that's where I think it's going to wind up being, but I do think if it doesn't improve, it has that possibility. I do also think there could be an element of, this is a guy who had this great spring, got all this attention, and has come into the season trying to go gangbusters and prove himself and move himself up the system. And there could be some extra whiff, some of that type of stuff involved with just putting too much pressure on himself. I could absolutely see that. everything else about Andrew Fisher, even the third base defense has been like, okay, that's still better than I thought it was going to be when he got drafted. But I do think there is a potential big time issue in the whiff, and I don't want to take away from everything else he's doing, but I do think it's something that people need to be aware of and that he is going to have to get better with if it's going to work out how everyone hopes, which is that the Brewers end up with a guy who's a legitimate big-time power threat in the middle of the order, which they obviously are always kind of looking for. He has that potential, but there is a real concern here that I think everyone needs to be at least aware of, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I just have to laugh when I see those comments on social media saying to bring up Fisher, and I think he's telling you through the numbers that he's a talented hitter. He's got a ton of power, and there's still some things he needs to work on. And I think the only thing that I really have to say is that I don't want this to be a situation where, you know, you get overwhelmed with the power numbers, you move him up aggressively, move him up too quick, and things go off the rails. And sometimes you can't get back on track. You know, it just gets inside a player's head that they're struggling for the first time in their life. You know, they've never struggled in little league, high school, college, pro ball to that point. And then you move them up too quick. They haven't made the adjustments they need to make. And then, like I said, it just goes off the rails. So I think he's where he needs to be right now. Power is obviously impressive. But until the whiffs come down a little bit, I think he's where he needs to be.
Agreed. Marco Dingus, we'll talk about quickly here. He's got a 116 WRC plus. He's showing some pretty huge raw power himself. Strikeout rates in a solid place at 24%, though the whiff rates kind of point to more. I do wonder with a guy like him if he's one of those. I haven't been able to really dive into like what counts he's whiffing in, but it does feel like when he gets to 2 strikes, he's capable of taking a different approach. Kind of takes his huge home run swings early in counts, and then he can kind of rein it in a little bit with 2 strikes. So I do think there are guys who have higher whiff rates than strikeout rates because they're capable of having 2 different approaches within an at-bat. I do know he's dealing with, I believe, some shoulder issues at the moment, which is why we haven't really seen him catch for a while. But what are you seeing with Dingus? What are your thoughts with him so far?
Yeah, and he should be back behind the plate this coming week, is what I've heard. But I'm pretty much where I was at last year. Is that bat first guy, very talented. I'm not concerned about the whiffs with him. I think his approach is fine for now. Might be a little too aggressive as he continues to move up the ladder. But I'm most interested in just watching how he develops behind the plate, because if you move from behind the plate, then it's going to demand more offensive production. And I'm already seeing like offensive stats are good. They're great right now, but as he continues to move up the system, it's reasonable to expect the offensive production is going to diminish slightly with the levels, at least until he adjusts a little bit. So as long as he maintains where he's at, I'm fine with that. But moving from behind the plate, that worries me a little bit, because I'm not sure where he's going to end up.
Yeah, I would agree. I think he's got all the athleticism and the tools to stick behind the plate, which is good. I think that's not always been the case with these guys they draft as catchers and try and make catchers. There's a lot to clean up footwork-wise when I watch him. And I will say the one other big thing that I always notice when I watch him is he has to clean up the body language a lot. That is one thing that it's just, especially when you're catching, pitchers and catchers cannot get away with bad body language. It shows, everyone sees it. The whole team sees it. Your opponents see it. Everyone watching on TV sees it. You just can't be showing negative emotion, and he does it far too often for my liking. So that's something he's going to have to work on. But that is something that you can get better at. You've seen a lot of players over the course of time be able to improve their body language, but I hope he's aware of it. I'm sure that the Brewers are aware of it and have talked to him about it. But that's the only other thing, because
it affects your pitching staff as well too. So
yes, absolutely.
I hope that's not setting the tone for the staff. I don't think they're. I'm not going to point to Marco Dingus as a reason for any struggles. I don't think that's the case. But I'm just saying, when you see that your catcher's mentally affected by, they're frustrated with something, then that gets in your head on the mound as well.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Speaking of pitching, we will talk about one pitcher in this group, and it's Braylon Owens. It's not like it's been insane results wise. He's got a 4.24 ERA, though, compared to the rest of the staff, that has been insane results wise. It's a 4.09 FIP. He's striking out almost 35% of batters he's facing. So like the swing and miss has been really good. The walk rate's still too high. It's 10.7%, but there has been a lot to like with Braylon Owens. In terms of pure stuff, it's nothing crazy. It's a bunch of solid pitches across the board that he mixes well. He seems to have, I would guess, like with what Baseball Prospectus does with tunneling, I would bet he's very good at that. And he just has a good feel for making this work with what he's got. High level competitor. You could see it when you watched him in like the College World Series last year. He got the final outs in UTSA's upset against Texas. And then he actually his career in college ended with a comebacker that hit him. It was like 105 off the bat, and he tried desperately to stay in the game to keep pitching. So like there's a high level of intensity, competitiveness, and just kind of maximizing what he has for a $10,000 signing bonus in the 10th round last year. Like, this is a really, really interesting arm. I think that they're probably feeling pretty good about given his start to the season, right?
Oh, for sure. And the only thing I'll add is like I had Owens ticketed for Wilson to start the year. So to see him go to high A right away and he's not dominating, but he's been passable. He's been borderline good. There's obviously some concerns there, but I would say he's been one of the very few bright spots for the Rattlers pitching staff so far this year. So I've been proud to see him go out there and do what he's done so far.
Yeah. In the who's not section of the Timber Rattlers, we've got one hitter, Daniel Dickinson. He's walking a ton. Outside of that, there's just really not been much on the offensive side of things for him, and that was a concern of mine when he got drafted. He was ranked pretty highly, like across the board, by all the draft experts, and I think where we saw the Brewers get him and the fact they signed him for slot or maybe even a little below spoke more to how actual MLB teams were viewing him in that draft class. The defense has been a little bit surprisingly poor too. Like there's been a lot of errors that I wouldn't have expected to see from him. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing much in general with Dickinson at this point. Like he makes pretty solid swing decisions, but there just hasn't been much to grasp onto in terms of like, oh, maybe this is where it happens. The only thing I will say is he broke the hamate less than a year ago. Sometimes there can be a long recovery to figuring that out and getting the strength back, and maybe the impact shows up at some point. But I do feel as though this one might just end up being somebody where you have a fine utility type player that helps throughout the minors, and there's just not a ton of upside there with Dickinson. Does that make sense? Is that kind of what you've seen so far?
It is, yeah. It wasn't a pick that I was particularly high on. I had him at 38 on my preseason top 100, and I honestly went back and forth about. I was debating with myself if that was too high. I'm pulling for him, but there's not a whole lot there. I mean, he swiped 11 bags in May. He's walking, a sizable amount. but maybe he's just being a little bit too passive. I'm not sure. Hopefully he can turn it around a little bit. I remember we've had guys in the past, like maybe he turns into like an Ethan Murray.
It's exactly who I was thinking of. Yes.
But I think Murray is a little bit better defensively from what I've seen. I could be wrong, but those are the kind of vibes I get. Hopefully, if things kind of turn around.
Yeah, he reminds me a lot of Murray, but Murray was a legitimately solid defensive shortstop, like you said. So I think that might be the difference there too. So again, you're not going to hit on every pick. I'm not saying they definitely missed on this one. There's a lot of time left for Dickinson to show something, but right now early returns haven't been super encouraging. And then in this section, we also have basically every non-Braylon Owens pitcher on the staff. It's not been great at the high A level. Michael Fowler had a solid start out of the pen. He's shown some decent things, but like Bryce Message, it's been a struggle, and he's hurt right now. Ethan Dortche's definitely struggled. Yorman Galinda's got moved up to Double-A, but that was not due to performance. Jason Woodward also hasn't looked great coming off his surgery. Stuff doesn't look like it's at the same level as what we saw when he first returned in 2024. Quentin Lowe's stuff looks good, but he's walking everyone, and when it's in the zone, it seems to be getting crushed. I think all of them have plenty of leash, and Lowe's probably the closest to like, okay, where do they go from here? But the stuff is legitimately still pretty good. So I'm guessing they're going to give him some time, given all the injuries he's dealt with and the timeline he's been on. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything specifically you want to talk about with any of them, but it has been a struggle at this level.
There's nowhere to go but up, right? No, but there's
that is true.
Honestly, though, there are a couple guys that I'm legitimately worried about with these struggles, but there are other guys, like you said, like Lowe. His stuff looks great, and we just can't forget about the fact that he missed 2 years, and he's just coming back, and it's a level that he's never pitched at before. And honestly, I think most of these guys are going to be fine. But it's been a poor start to the year, and that stuff happens sometimes. And sometimes it just bleeds throughout the entire pitching staff when things aren't going well. So.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, you kind of mentioned some weird stuff at low A. I think every level below AAA is definitely dealing with a different type of baseball. I don't know exactly what it is, but walks and homers are just skyrocketing in the minors. I don't think that's a coincidence, and Baseball America also doesn't think it's a coincidence, and a lot of people are starting to grasp onto that. They don't know exactly what changed, but something seems to have changed. So I think giving it time and letting these guys kind of figure out either one, how to use this new baseball, or two, maybe it's just over time we get back to what they're used to and everything kind of falls into place there. But we will see on that front. The pleasant surprise we have for the Timber Rattlers is Josiah Ragsdale. A pick that I didn't really know what to do with when they made it. It was an interesting one. There were some interesting tools there. But watching him in low A last year, there was like no power. It was slapping everything just opposite field, basically. And he had solid results, but it was just not a sustainable way to hit. This year, he's showing some power. He's got an ISO of 144. He's got 3 homers. The slug is in a decent spot. He's still drawing a ton of walks, 18% walk rate. Strikeouts and whiffs are up a little bit. I think you're making that trade-off for the power. But I like what I've seen from Ragsdale. He's playing a solid defensive outfield. It's not a very good arm, but everything else about it is pretty good out there. He's doing well on the bases for the most part. I think this has been a really nice, pleasant surprise for a guy who I didn't know. I thought they might return him to low A. Just not knowing what exactly the profile was. But I think this is somebody who's kind of on the edge of like the top 30, 40 type guys in the system at this point.
Yeah, color me impressed. I didn't know what to do with Ragsdale in my preseason list. I ended up putting him at 75 because I was not a believer that there was going to be any power. So he's proved me wrong. Obviously, it's still a small sample. We're still early, but This is a guy that's in the running for. We do monthly pitcher and player of the month awards on my account, and he's certainly in the running. I don't know if he's going to win it, but he had an outstanding May. I've got him at 341 for the month. Swiped 9 bags. So yeah, I've been impressed. I think I saw he was added to Baseball America's top 30. So I don't think I'm ready to put him up there yet. But certainly a great start, and he could be in that conversation for me next year if he continues along.
Yeah, agreed. We'll move to Double-A now. So Biloxi, 23-23 record to this point. I believe they have a doubleheader today. Starting on the Who's Hot section, Damon Keith. That's a name I know you had heard some good things from the Brewers coming into the season. I know that this was a guy who was ranked by Fangraphs in the Dodgers system only a couple seasons ago as a guy who was, in their top 50, whatever. But he has shown really, really well in Double-A. There's some swing and miss, some strikeout, unsurprisingly, but it's a 142 WRC plus. He's got 5 homers, but the exit velos, I mean, we've seen multiple 114 plus exit velos. He's playing a solid outfield. He's got a really good arm himself, good athlete, old for the level for sure, but a lot of really interesting stuff with Keith. Yeah, where are you at with him? I guess obviously you were higher on him coming into the season. What are you thinking after you've gotten the chance to kind of watch him perform in Biloxi?
The way he's performed this year is exactly what I hoped for, best case scenario, when he was acquired by the system. But I'm looking back here. The one thing that kind of surprises me is he's not walking at the rate that he has throughout his professional career. I guess the last couple of years has been down, but this is a guy that walked 90 times in 2022. I know we're a few years removed from that now, but overall, like I said, it's kind of what I hoped for when Milwaukee brought him in, and I think there's even more power in there than what he's shown. I hope he doesn't start selling out for power, because the strikeouts are already at the edge of being concerning, despite the high level of production that he's had for Biloxi. So hopefully he can continue on, hopefully bring up the walk rate a little bit. And I think we'll see him in AAA before too long. May was a little bit down from where he was in March and April. But he was also dealing with some minor injuries in there too. So yeah, I think we'll see him in Nashville at some point here soon.
Yeah. Dylan O'Ray is next, and that's a very different profile from Damon Keith. A lot of walks, very little strikeout, very little whiff. It's all kind of based on the speed, putting the ball in play. He's hitting 317 with the 437 on base. Again, the ISO is only 072. He does have a homer this year, 7 doubles, a triple, but he's 27 for 32 on steals. This is a guy who stole 60 bases a couple years ago. 131 WRC plus at the level. We got a question from Sprawl 135 asking, the numbers on Dylan O'Ray look good, but there isn't much ceiling there. Any way to flip him for a relief pitcher at the deadline? Yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely, in my eyes, somebody that is probably going to be in talks for, a smaller move if they are going to make one. He seems like the type of guy who would be included in those types of talks, but I do know that the Brewers are internally pretty high on him. So I don't know that it would be something where they're just moving him to move him. What are your thoughts on O'Ray, and do you think he's a guy who we might see moved at the deadline?
Well, it's definitely possible. He does fit that mold of a guy that they could, swap for a small major league acquisition. But yeah, this is a guy, Matt Klein said it was his personal favorite underrated prospect in the system. And he just looks like a Milwaukee Brewers type player. I mean, power is never going to be a part of his game. Early on I had thoughts that maybe he would develop and do like a 5 home run, 10 home run guy. That's just not who he's going to be, at least at the major league level. I would say I look at him and I see maybe a David Hamilton. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's possible. Short would be kind of tough, but everything else, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. He's not going to be at short. So I don't know if he'll end up at second base long term or in the outfield, but the speed is real. Very good approach at the plate, and yeah, a good just ball player, solid ball player. I'm happy to have him in the organization. I hope he doesn't get moved, but yeah, he could bring something back. I know obviously the price of pitching is way up there these days, so I don't think he's gonna bring you in like a huge name relief arm, but yeah, he could be in those talks for one of those swaps at the deadline.
Yeah. Matt Wood, we have, catcher, had a really solid kind of breakout in Biloxi last year when he got to the level. He's got a 123 WRC plus this year, carried heavily by a 21% walk rate, but only an 11.5% strikeout rate. So really good on that front. He also has 6 homers, 2 doubles, 2 triples. It's been walks and power for the most part, but that's not a bad thing from a guy who showed pretty decently defensively at catcher too. Not a great arm, but improved from where he entered the system, I would say. Thoughts on Wood? Is he a guy who has a legitimate like backup catcher type of ceiling in here for the Brewers?
I think there's that ceiling in there for sure. It's just a fascinating start to the year for Wood. And when I look at it, I look at the strikeout and the walk numbers and then the power. I mean, I don't think he's got huge power, but it's played very well this year. And just the numbers are telling me that this is sustainable for the next level. I think he could move up to Nashville today, and I think we could reasonably expect the same thing out of him. So I'm not worried about if he's going to be able to maintain that at the next level, but it's not the most exciting ceiling, but I think there's something in there, and I've been surprised. There's a time when he was at high A that I didn't think I would be as excited as I am today, because there was not power there. Strikeout walk numbers aren't where they are, and this might still be a fluke. We're still early, but it's just been fascinating so far. I don't think there's been anybody else in the system that has intriguing numbers quite like this. So low batting average, but that's leading. He's been very valuable for the Shuckers.
Yeah, he kind of flipped his profile more than anybody else in the system over the last year or so, where it just kind of almost everything changed in a weird way. Like the power showed up, the walks showed up, the strikeouts went down, the defense kind of improved, the throwing improved. All of these things that he struggled with, he got better at. The average in turn kind of went down. He hasn't hit for the same type of hit tool, but I think that's a trade-off I would make. So definitely an interesting guy to watch. And I agree he could handle Nashville if there was room for him right now to get playing time. There's just not really. But with Blake Burke next on the list, I mean, I think everyone listening probably knows a pretty good amount about Blake Burke at this point. 12 homers, 10 doubles, a triple. The whiff rate is 31%. So there is some swing and miss there. The strikeout rate, 24% though. Really solid spot for a guy with that much pop. This is a guy who could also be handling AAA right now in my eyes if they moved him up there. But for now, with Brock Wilken, Luke Adams coming back soon, it's going to be hard to find first base playing time for him up at that level. But right now, I don't think he has much more to prove at AA, right?
Yeah, I think at this point we've got a good idea of who Blake Burke is going to be as a professional hitter. He's got the power ever since he moved up to AA. That's been, a mainstay. So I think that'll continue on. And I think he's going to be a solid bat to keep an eye on. Hopefully he gets moved up here soon. I'm excited for him.
Yeah. I think the name everyone will know, no doubt about it, is Jesus Madej. He's next on the list. 6 homers, 7 doubles, 3 triples, 109 WRC plus with a 792 OPS in AA. Strikeout rate's only 15.5%. He's walking over 11% of the time. there are just so few holes to poke in a 19-year-old's game at AA with that type of profile. Like, it's just kind of hard to believe. The swings kind of mirror each other from the left and the right side. Jake McKibben pointed this out to me before anyone else, actually, and pointed out like they seem to be working on some weight shift changes with him. Definitely seems like they are. Instead of he'd get out on his front foot quite often, and he still had the power and the strength to hit the ball hard. But it also led to a lot of ground balls on his hardest hit balls. It seems like he's really working on staying balanced, and we have seen the power kind of tick up of late in terms of actual over the fence power. He's just special. I mean, the defense at short has actually still looked pretty good. I think there's a chance he's a shortstop. I think there's a chance he ends up at third base. He's definitely. You can have your opinion on this as well if you have any, but I know a lot of people were talking about the added weight being like bad weight. I don't see that at all. To be completely blunt about it, I think he just has a much bigger butt now in a muscular way. Like, he just put on good weight in that way. That's all it looks like to me. It kind of reminds me of Jose Ramirez's build now. Like, he's not losing speed. He's not really losing athleticism, but he's just got a thicker lower half at this point. So everything about my day this season has been about what I could hope for from him in AA. I don't know if you're any different, but it's been a really good start.
No, I think he just he was taken aside by Luke Adams and Darian Miller and said, we need to prepare you to get hit by more pitches. And so that's why I put on the weight. No, I mean, there's not much you can say. It just continues to impress you every day. I can't remember what kind of start he had. He had a little bit of an offer to start the year, and I remember somebody saying, oh, clearly he's not ready for AA. And I remember saying, this guy hit 333 in big league spring training as an 18-year-old. I think he'll work things out. And I don't know if anything particularly is like jumping off the page at you, just that what he's doing at his age is incredible. And he's got all the tools, truly. And in some ways I say, well, he's a little bit behind where Churio was at this point. And then in other ways, I'm like, well, he's ahead of Churio, when he was at this level in these ways. So, there's really not much else for me to say. Just that I've been impressed. I think we'll see probably the entire year at AA. Maybe he gets a week in AAA like Churio did a couple years back. But I think he's where he needs to be, and he's the number one prospect in baseball for a reason.
Yep. We've got a guy who'd kind of fallen off the prospect map a little bit due to some injuries and not quite performing last year. And Mike Bovee, he's had a really strong May after an okay start to the season, but really picked it up in May. He's got 3 homers, 3 doubles this month. The strikeout rate is under 12%. He's got a 112 WRC plus, 807 OPS. Playing some left field, playing some first. He played a little bit of third at times this year. I think my guess is the Brewers still like the bat a decent amount, and they're trying to find a way for him to find defensive versatility to potentially be kind of like a multi-position option at some point. But it's good to see him back healthy after the shoulder injury last year, and just kind of seeing him perform to the level that I think he's always been capable of as a hitter.
Yeah, I think he was much more Mike Bovee in May. I mean, this is what he looked what we expected out of him after his first 2 professional seasons. That's the way he looked in May. So hopefully that's just a sign of more things to come. As you mentioned, 7 walks, 10 strikeouts, and 77 at-bats in May. So bringing that whiff rate down, and hopefully we see more of the same, because I was starting to get a little worried. I know he was coming back from injuries and everything, but anytime you see a guy that's just a natural hitter who's got the hand-eye coordination that he does, struggling the way he was, it's concerning. And so I still have high hopes for him. I think he can reach the big leagues and have value offensively. But he needs to continue the way he was going in May.
Yep, agreed. The final name we have here is Mark Manfredi, senior, lefty reliever. So far this year, he's thrown 22 innings, 22 and a third, 38 strikeouts, 11 walks. The whiff rate overall is 35.5%, which is really good. Strikeout rate is 39%, which is great as well. The ERA is 3.63, but the FIP is 2.65. I think he's been a lot better than the overall surface stats would say. What have you seen from Manfredi? To me, he feels like a guy who should be in Nashville soon.
Oh, for sure. Even coming into the year, I was kind of like, yeah, he doesn't really have anything left to prove at AA. So outside of one or two outings, he's been pretty much dominant this year. Obviously, it's been the case for him since he turned pro. Can still bring the free passes down a little bit, but he's striking out the world. 20 Ks and 11 and a third in May. And so I think he's, a prime candidate to move up as soon as Nashville has an opening in the bullpen.
Yeah. In the who's not section, we've got three arms to talk about. Bishop Letson being the first. And the first, before we do anything else, we got a question from Sprawl 135 asking what is going on with Bishop Letson. I don't necessarily know if this is in reference to him not pitching the last 2 weeks, or if it's in reference to the performance, or both. I don't really know what's going on. I don't know if you know what's going on with him not pitching in the last. It's been 2 full weeks or a little longer, I think now. But the overall numbers definitely have been a struggle. May's been a lot better, I would say. I know the overall ERA is still not good, 5.73 in May, but it was a 4.37 FIP. The whiff was way up. The ground balls were up a little bit more again. I think a lot of the walks were down quite a bit, even though they still weren't in a great spot. I felt like he was trending decently, and then now we haven't really seen him for 2 weeks. Do you know what's going on that front?
No, unfortunately, I don't have any insights into what's going on with him the past couple of weeks. But really, I mean, I have to believe, especially like AA and high, that there's something going on with testing something out at the level, because anytime you see entire pitching staffs and multiple levels going through stuff like this, it's just, you got to scratch your head. But I mean, I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, my concern level for Bishop Letson is probably a 3. I mean, he's just got outstanding stuff. We've seen it time and time again. I mean, we're talking about a sample size of 25 innings pitched, a little bit more. So I think as the season goes on, if he is dealing with something, maybe he needs just to get healthy a little bit. I think we'll see the ERA come down and the peripherals just improve. And I'm not overly concerned about Letson at this point.
Yeah, I am with you on that. Brett Witrowski, a lot of his stuff is actually not in that terrible of a place if you look at the peripherals, except for the fact he's giving up over 2 homers per 9 innings. And again, I would guess that's at least somewhat tied to the baseballs. He has always been a guy who has the type of stuff that could give up home runs. So I think the combo of that, what we're seeing, has not been good. I mean, the stuff is interesting. It's pretty good. He throws hard. It's not the greatest fastball shapes. And when you combine that with a ball that seems to be traveling, that is where you can get into trouble with the homers. But the strikeouts, the walks are down from where they have been other years. Like I'm not overly concerned about Witrowski. I wasn't crazy high on him coming into the season anyway, though. So I guess in terms of like my expectations, I think he's a reliever, and I think he's got a chance to be a big league arm just based off the velo and the spin. But that's kind of where I am with Witrowski. And then Jesus Broca's the other name. I'll let you talk about both of them. But Broca had a really solid season last year. Walks are up again for him quite a bit in the homers as well. So, again, I would guess partially tied to the baseballs. But what do you have on those two?
Yeah, in my eyes, I think Witrowski is the higher ceiling of the two. I've never been particularly high on him. I think from day one, I saw a reliever, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think he could succeed in that role. But I just am wondering why that transition hasn't happened at this point. I think he can be effective in the rotation at times, but his stuff will just play up more in shorter outings in my eyes. And then for Broca, he was one of the 10 names also that I targeted as just a name to watch, because he kind of accelerated through the system last year and caught some attention, went to the Arizona Fall League. And so a lot of times those 10 names include a lot of relievers just because they might not have the highest ceiling, but if they make an adjustment, they can really take off, unlike, a starting pitcher will take some more time, or a position player. So I think he's kind of tied in with the rest of the staff, and that his numbers will improve as the year goes on, because it seems like anytime they implement these changes, with whether it's the baseball or whatever, usually it's only temporary, like a month or two. So I expect kind of these numbers to kind of even out for the staff as a whole.
Yeah. Some pleasant surprises from this team. We have Darian Miller, who I mean, he's repeating the level for the third time, I believe, if not a little longer even, but 5 doubles, 8 homers. He's been hit 11 times, as you kind of hinted at. Him and Luke Adams are fighting for the king of that that type of category in the system, because they both will get hit constantly. But Miller's striking out and walking at like the same level, the same rate, I should say. It's an 1106 OPS, a 188 WRC plus. I don't actually buy that he's a great hitter, but I think he has made some strides and that he's improving. I think he's a really good leader when I watch him catch, but I don't know that he's a very good defender. Like, I think he's got a good grasp of like what pitchers need, and he probably calls a decent game. But in terms of receiving and blocking and throwing, like, all of that is not great. So for me, it's cool to see him performing. I'm happy for him because he's a guy who seems to work really hard and have a really good attitude. I don't really see too much more of a future than I already was seeing for him, which was kind of, if they ever need an emergency catcher at the big league level, maybe that's his one shot at getting that chance. But what he's seeing with Miller, and I mean, it is genuinely cool to see him having a really productive season so far.
Oh, most definitely. And I think the way he's playing this year is kind of what I hoped when he had his sort of breakout. Let's see, was it 2021 with the Mudcats?
Yeah.
This is kind of what I envisioned. I thought there was some power in there, draws his walks. I didn't see him sticking behind the plate. I'm kind of surprised he's still back there. But he's been able to be passable at times. I think he's made some improvements throwing out runners
a little bit. Yeah.
I don't think it's to the point where he's a viable major league option. So, I hope this continues offensively, and that, the team has a role for him someday. But I think at this point, we just got to chalk it up to a good start to the season, and, we'll keep a tab on him.
Yeah. We got a couple of relievers we'll hit on then here with Cameron Wagoner and Steven Cruz. Wagoner's thrown 10 1/3 innings. It's the first 10 1/3 innings that he has thrown in nearly 3 calendar years. So the fact that he's come back and he is touching 100, numerous 99 plus mile per hour pitches, and the breaking balls look pretty filthy themselves. The walk rate's at 2.4%, but it's a little misleading because he has hit 4 batters. So he's got 1 walk, but 4 hit by pitches. But either way, the strikeout rate's 34%. The whiff rate is well above 30%. The ERA is at 1.74, and the stuff looks filthy. To me, this looks like a guy who they might want to get to Nashville and see if he's an option. This is the type of stuff that can play at the big league level, genuinely, if he puts it together. I'm not saying he'd be an immediate option in the big leagues, but I would like to see it in AAA and see how it looks. And then the other part of that equation is that he might be a 40-man option at the end of the season too, if he looks the part. So what are you seeing with Wagoner? And then Steven Cruz too, who's having a really solid season after kind of fluctuating between high A and AA last year.
Yeah, for Wagoner, I mean, I love what he's doing, just hiding his wildness in the hit by pitches so that his line looks so much more clean. I think more pitchers could benefit from that. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I've been thoroughly impressed. We talked about it on X the other day. I think, was it after his first outing or second outing? I can't remember, but his stuff looks legit big league ready, or at least it has at times. And so I think he'll be in Nashville in short order. I don't know if we see him in Milwaukee this year, but I'm not going to put that out of the realm of possibility. just couldn't be happier for him. I know it's got to be so incredibly difficult to sit out for multiple years, and your future's up in the air and you just want to get back out there. So it's tough. But Steven Cruz, he's a guy I've been high on for a long time. He was actually in my top 30 prospects for a couple different years. And then things just kind of, it's just kind of a flash in the pan. They moved him to relief. Obviously value would have been a little bit higher if he could stick in the rotation. But the command has been great. Strikeouts have been up, and I think he's been one of the best stories this year, and really a bullpen that's been solid for the most part in Biloxi. Although there's been, like we said, some at the level, some concerning metrics, but considering whatever they're doing at the level, I think some of these guys have performed exceptionally well. I also look at Edwin Jimenez, who also missed significant time, and he's been back and pitching pretty well.
Yeah, that's a good call out too. Moving to Nashville, and I knew this was going to be a long pod, but we are going to go real long here, and that's okay. Nashville is 33-22, and on the hot side of things, like there's a lot of offense to talk about on some exciting prospects too. So Luis Lara, obviously he's already got a career high 7 homers. I've talked a lot about on the main podcast about how real that is and how much of that is AAA ballparks and that type of stuff. But there's real pop here, and he has added some, especially against lefties. And I think that's the main thing to talk about here. He, as a right-handed hitter, has looked very much like a guy who should be coming up to the big leagues. From the left side against righties, the overall numbers look pretty good, but all the peripherals are not backing that up at all. They back it up when he's batting righty. That does make it interesting for me as we look forward. Sal Frelick can't hit lefties to save his life at the moment. I do think that becomes a part where you can start to envision a quasi platoon where Lara probably still gets more playing time against righties at times too, not just straight platoon. But I could see that being his path to the big leagues at some point here. Either way, it's a 159 WRC plus. He's playing unbelievably good defense. We knew that was going to be the case. 18 of 22 on steals. Just a ton to like from Lara early this season, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And the other thing about him that I think gets overlooked, but he plays every single day. I mean, going back to last year, I'd be surprised if he missed more than 5 games between 2025 and 2026. But leading the organization in runs scored, hits, qualified hitters, and batting average. Like you said, I don't know if the power is real. I think he does have more power than what we've seen in past seasons. So I think part of that is real, but it's not going to be a 20 home run guy. I envisioned him being a glove first regular. I think that's what I hoped for coming into the year. And I think now we're looking at a Gold Glove starter for sure. If he continues to mature, and, sometimes these numbers don't translate to the big leagues, that happens all the time, but I think these numbers are real, and I think he's going to be a very, very valuable addition to the roster here soon. I mean, he's 90th percentile or better in K rate, whiff rate, and Z contact percentage.
Yep.
So all the metrics back up what he's doing. Just excited to see him in Milwaukee soon.
Yeah, Pat Murphy is going to absolutely love Luis Lara. He already does. He talked about it in spring, so he is going to be a very, very big fan of his when he does arrive. Jet Williams, I think another guy Pat is going to be a big fan of. Slow start. April, he had an 83 WRC plus. May, he had a 119 WRC plus. Started showing a little bit more of the power. Really good to see from him. The whiffs have been down from where they have been in the past this year, so that's been a really nice sign. Cooper Pratt also had a really nice May with a 109 WRC plus. He's slowed down a little bit at the end of the month. Both of them have. Both got off to really, really good starts in May and have slowed down a bit, but both of them showing a bit more power. I mean, those two I think are tied pretty hand in hand at this point. What are your thoughts on them? Do you think we see either or both of them anytime soon here?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think out of the three, including Lara, so Lara, Williams, and Pratt, I think Williams is probably the first one up out of the three, but there's another one that I think is up even before them that we'll talk about in a little bit. For Williams, concerned somewhat with the underlying metrics, but they've been trending in the right direction. Just exit velos and barrels are average. And so I expect them to be up a little bit. And I think, like I said, they've been trending in the right direction. So I'm excited to see if that continues. But for Pratt, just always had a very balanced approach, very little swing and miss. Offensive development is going to take time. And I think more power will come, similar to what we saw with Bryce Terang. I don't know if it's going to be to that extent, but I think it will come someday, and I think it's going to take, multiple years in the big leagues for that to come through. It's not going to be like next week he's going to start to hit for power with Nashville, and that's going to come up in the big leagues. It's going to be, an extended development. But I'm excited to see that these numbers are coming around, because most of this lineup was just struggling the first month of the year. And, they've really come around outside of Lara and Leonard. It was pretty rough the first month, and it looked a lot better in May.
Yes. Yep. Jefferson Caro, overall numbers actually don't look insanely great in May. They're basically hovering around average for the month. All of the underlying stuff has gone in a really, really positive direction for him in the month of May. It's a 400 xwOBA in the month, which is ridiculous. And with that, his strikeout rate is 14%, and the whiff rate's down well under 30, where it had been well over 30, and the strikeout rate had been really high in April too. So he's impacting the ball, and he's getting the ball in play a lot. He's had incredibly poor luck this month, but he's looking the part of a guy who is ready to just be in the big leagues at this point. I think the throwing is not ever going to get back to where it was, but I think it's trended much more positively this year. And I think it's to the point where, like, the Brewers at some point do need to figure out whether they feel good enough about him being the guy in 2027, and whether they'd be willing to move on from William Contreras and hand the reins to a guy like Caro. Gary Sanchez has come back down to earth, unsurprisingly, at the big league level. I don't think they're ready to just cut Gary Sanchez or anything like that, but I do think they're getting to the point where they do probably have to consider getting Caro some opportunity at the big league level and getting him. You don't want like a Contreras injury to trigger that. You'd hope that they can find a way to make it work without something like that. But at some point, it does feel like an extended look at some point this season. Not saying it has to be right away, but at some point, I think they're going to have to give him at least somewhat of a look and figure out if they feel good enough about it. But I think they're going to feel pretty good about it. Everything else about Caro, like in terms of leadership, in terms of the way he handles the staff, I mean, the Brewers have been impressed with that since he was in rookie ball. Like, that has been the talk of the organization since he was first signed. So the fact that he's putting it together offensively, and the arm does appear to be at least getting back to where it's fine, it's solid enough. I think this has been a really, really positive early start to the season, even if the numbers don't necessarily look incredible for Caro. Is that kind of what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, for sure. And just before I forget, I wanted to say, like, if the organization does feel the need to move on from Contreras, like we've seen them part with other big leaguers that are, low on control, like, you need to have Caro. He needs to have at least half a major league season under his belt, I feel like, to take over a regular role. And so, yeah, that extended time with Milwaukee it's got to be coming up here pretty soon. And I can't stress how valuable it was for Caro to be with the big league squad throughout the playoff run last year, because that's probably the most invaluable experience you can have as a player. And even though he didn't play in the postseason, he was in that environment, and that's something that he can take with him. So I think he's just a mature player. He has been throughout his professional career. It had been a little while since I had visited his Savant page, and so I was very pleasantly surprised. I was already planning to come on here and talk about how I don't think his numbers are necessarily doing him justice. And it definitely backs me up because the offensive metrics are just outstanding pretty much across the board. And the baseline stats are good. They're solid, but they don't really do it justice. There's significant chase and whiff concerns around the 30th percentile in both those categories. But he frequently finds the barrel, doesn't strike out too much. And like you said, the arm's been trending back in the right direction. I think even if, we never see that cannon again, unfortunately, that he had behind the plate, I think he can be an above average big league catcher for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that for sure. Few pitchers we've got to talk about here. Tyson Hardin, since he made it to AAA, he was among the AA pitchers who were struggling. And man, I watched a lot of his AA starts. I wrote about it on Patreon. I thought he had taken a step this season watching him, and then the numbers just did not back that up at all. Since he got to AAA, it has looked a lot more like what I think he's capable of. So it's been 18 2/3 innings over 3 starts, which, first of all, that's on its own. That's really good for a guy who, again, 2 years ago was a reliever for Mississippi State. This is a guy who's now stretched out, able to go 6+ innings in all 3 of his first AAA starts. 0.96 ERA in that time. It's a 2.99 FIP. So obviously he's probably had a little bit of luck involved there, but also still been very good in terms of the peripherals. The walk rate, which had kind of skyrocketed in AA this year, is back to a normal, pretty solid place. Not quite where it was last year, but that was also just elite. Strikeout rate solid. The whiffs are down a little bit in AAA, but he is getting a lot of soft contact in these 3 starts. The expected weighted on base average is 267. It's a lot of grounders. It's a lot of weak contact. He's getting a lot of chase, 31% chase rate. There is a lot to like here. He's throwing all 5 pitches. And I think the biggest thing for me this year is that Tyson Hardin figured out what I'm guessing is a kick change for his changeup, but it went from a pitch that he really didn't have much of in terms of a changeup to, I could make the argument, his best pitch. It's nasty. It only takes like 6 miles per hour off the fastball, but it's a ton of depth. He commands it pretty well. I'm really excited about it. It gives him a totally different look for lefties who did give him some issues last year. I think this is a major league starter and one that could make starts at the big league level soon. If you ask me if I wanted Robert Gasser or Tyson Hardin making a start in the big leagues right now, I would pick Tyson Hardin. That would be where I'm at with him. So I don't think he's going to. He's not on the 40-man. They've got guys on the 40-man. But I think by next year, he's a very legitimate option for the Brewers.
I think we see him in Milwaukee by the end of the year. I really do. And I watched his first outing in AAA, and I was like, he's back. This is the Tyson Hardin we saw last year.
Yeah.
And limiting hard contact, avoiding barrels. Like you said, free passes were up to start the year, but it wasn't even to the point where I was overly concerned, and those have come back down. Just struggled majorly the first month of the year, and now in May, I mean, he's up there in contention for the pitcher of the month in the organization for sure. 3.29 ERA in 5 starts, 27 in the 3rd innings, and he's doing it at AAA now. So it's been great to see, and I truly think he's back to form.
Yeah, he feels like the type of guy they could do the Burns, Woodruff, Peralta route of like, hey, put him in the bullpen if needed and let him kind of shove from there and get that experience up there. But we have a couple relievers to hit on here at the end. We don't have to talk a ton about either of them because MLB fans have already seen Craig Yoho and Brian Fitzpatrick, but both of them are off to very good starts. Yoho's FIP is a bit higher than the ERA, but that's due to a couple homers early on after returning, and it's been a lot better since then. But it's a 1.12 ERA for him, 33% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate is nice to see. Zone rates could still be a lot better, but Yoho looks like he's in a pretty good spot. The changeup's still a nasty pitch. It's getting a 48% whiff rate, even though it's his highest used pitch, which is ridiculous. And the sweeper is getting a 63% whiff rate. It's not used a ton, but when they do swing at it, it's not much contact being made. The only pitch he's really commanded well so far this year, though, is the changeup, and I think that's the main thing. He's going to have to show he can command the other 3 pitches a little bit better. And then Brian Fitzpatrick, we saw at the big league level, he looked like a guy who can absolutely get outs in Major League Baseball. He has not given up an earned run in AAA. Strikeout rate also 32.7%. Walk rate only 5.5%. Again, it's a deep pitch mix for a reliever. I think that gives a guy a pretty good advantage to have that type of 5-pitch mix. He's a big league arm. I hope that we see him back in the big leagues at some point this year because he looks like someone who can help the Brewers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have much else to add. Just that both these guys are big league relievers, and it's just a question of when their consistent opportunity will come. I've always been high on Yoho. I think obviously he's been the premier relief prospect for quite some time now. These are 2. I only had 4. Four sole relievers on my top 100 list coming into the year, and so these are 2 of the 4. The others being Will Childers and Mark Manfredi. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to update people around the All-Star break on if Fitzpatrick has given up a run yet.
Yeah. Yes, we will. Couple hitters that aren't as hot in AAA, Tyler Black. We don't need to go too deep into Tyler Black. I think at this point, unfortunately, he's just kind of in that fringy big league spot. And frankly, the fact he's not really performed that well in AAA either of the last 2 years is a bit more concerning than anything else. Incredible lucky stretch when he came up to the big leagues that got everyone pretty excited, but he was not actually hitting the ball well in the big leagues. And then Brock Wilken, who had a really good, solid stretch where he had like a 29 game on base streak. But the overall numbers, it's a 72 WRC plus with a 29% strikeout rate. So I think both of them are just unfortunately not showing what you would hope to see at this point in their careers. Wilken has more time than Black does to kind of show some stuff and figure it out. And there's a little more in-game power from him that could obviously be helpful for the Brewers. But right now he's looking like someone who just might not quite pan out the way they had hoped, which was always a little bit of the concern with that pick. But yeah, anything you want to add on Black or Wilken?
No, just I think especially at AAA the last couple of years, it seems like he's lost his identity at the plate. The things we loved about Black and were intriguing about him as an offensive threat seem to be kind of vanishing. Pretty much no power this year. So yeah, it's tough to see. I hope he gets a consistent role somewhere, even if it's not Milwaukee. And then Wilken, just a terrible start to the year. He actually was quite a bit better for a stretch, like very end of April and early May. But it's still, the numbers still just aren't there. And the main thing is his calling card is his power, and it's been missing this year. So drawing walks, striking out a bunch. I don't know if he just needs some more time at the level or if he needs to go back down to AA and reset. But hopefully he can get it figured out.
Yeah. Couple arms to talk about. Tate Keener, who's currently injured. I think he's had more bad luck than anything here. Like it's a 4.48 FIP, which isn't great, but it's a 5.8 ERA. The walks are a little too high, but he's getting a lot of swing and miss. The contact hasn't been overly loud. I'm not super worried about Keener. I think he's a big league arm at some point. I don't necessarily think he would help right now, but I think he is somebody who can get out at the big league level in some capacity. It might be more likely to be out of the pen, though, where the stuff could play up a little bit more. And then Carlos Rodriguez kind of fits that exact mold right now, where he's helping eat innings at the big league level, and it's very helpful and it's productive for the Brewers. But right now, that's kind of what you're looking at for his ceiling, I would think. So it's fine. That's how some people pan out, and you can have a long big league career, even if it's not necessarily with Milwaukee the whole time, being that type of guy. But that's where I'm at on both of them. I still like Keener. I still think he's super interesting with his arm slot and the stuff. But for Rodriguez, I think this is kind of what he is, and there can be value in that, but not necessarily what you were at one point hoping during his minor league career.
Yeah, I'm not concerned with Keener. I'll pretty much leave it at that. I think the numbers will continue to improve as we go along here. Carlos Rodriguez, you won't find a bigger Carlos Rodriguez fan than myself. I mean, he was my back-to-back pitcher of the year in the organization. What was that, 2022 and 23? Maybe I'm off a year or two, but unfortunately, I think it's a change of scenery candidate if he's going to get like a consistent starting role or consistent big league role. So in the meantime, he's just going to eat innings when they need him to, unfortunately. Although that provides value, like you said.
Yeah, for sure. A couple pleasant surprises. We have Edys Leonard, who you mentioned earlier, just having a really, really productive offensive season. Strikeouts down, OPS in a 918 spot, 140 WRC plus. He's not really outperforming the expected stats to a crazy degree. The contact's been pretty loud. It's just been really, really solid from him. And then Will Childers on the pitching side of things, really, again, kind of like Hardin, went from nothing to counter lefties to a really good changeup. Again, my guess is it's a kick change. But he just came off the IL. The breaking stuff, the changeup, both are very, very interesting. And then the fastball has pretty good velo. He'll get up there into the upper 90s at times. But it has still been the pitch that kind of gets hit. It's a high arm slot, and the fact that it doesn't have crazy carry on it does kind of lead it to be more in that dead zone type place for a fastball of his arm slot, but still a really interesting arm who can generate quite a bit of whiff. What do you have on those two?
Yeah, I think Leonard is going to be the next prospect up. I know he's not a top prospect like we talk about with Lara and Pratt and so on, but for me, I just know the way the organization operates, and typically, unless there's a consistent like everyday role for someone, they're not going to bring someone up. They tend to just fill in with guys like Leonard that can possibly play a couple different positions and fill some at bats while they need it. And so I think that's the role he's going to fill in the near future. And maybe he can carve out something of a long-term role. We'll see. But it's been great to see because he's been bouncing around the minor leagues for a long time top prospect with the Dodgers. And so it's been great to see he's been leading that offense along with Luis Lara this year. And then for Will Childers, he's going to be a big league arm. There's no doubt in my mind about that. I think he's outperformed some of his metrics. I think there's some work to be done there. And then he's also coming back from an injury. So I don't know if they're probably going to give him some more time before he gets up with the big league club. Obviously, they've still got Yoho and Fitzpatrick ready to go whenever they need him. So, I think we'll see him in Milwaukee at some point, whether that's late this year or some point in 2027.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, that brings us to a couple other topics we're going to hit on, and we'll go we're not going to rush through, but we'll try and go a little quicker since we are already 2:20 into this thing. But just who are some players off to slow starts that you can expect to turn things around as things get going? We already talked about some of them, so we don't have to go super in depth on those guys. But anyone else that we haven't gone in depth on, feel free to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I won't go too in depth because, like you said, we've talked a lot about these guys, but mainly the top prospect arms. They're just too good for the way they're performing to this point as a group. So Letson, Dorsey, Hardin, DeBerry. DeBerry's had some good outings lately. Obviously, Hardin has as well. And then Cooper Pratt obviously started to turn things around, as well as Jet Williams. He's getting more towards where I kind of expect him to be. But like I said, that offensive development is going to take some time. Eric Batanti, I think do we have a question coming up for Batanti? I won't go into more.
Yeah, Alex on Twitter asked or said kind of, don't look now, but Eric Batanti has a slash line of 248, 394, 459 in high A. The under the hood numbers don't seem out of character. Has there been any signs he's making improvements to raise his prospect status, or can we attribute his slash line to his 391 BABIP and move on? So, yeah, go ahead.
I think part of it is the BABIP, but I also think it's basically where I expected him to be at this point. I expected there still to be whiff concerns. Honestly, a little bit pleasantly surprised with the walk numbers. I was concerned that both numbers were going to go the opposite directions of where we wanted them to, and they've, I think, pretty much maintained from low A. But I think there's going to be more power coming, and I'm not worried about him. I think as long as he continues to maintain where he's at and where he was last year, I think eventually we'll see the numbers start to unfold a little bit and develop into more of a bigger offensive threat. So, and then Brock Wilken, I put him in there because I think he can't possibly get any worse from where he's at. I think the power is going to start to show up, because even if you're swinging missing a lot, there's no way that he's not generating some sort of power. And it just hasn't been there. So I think there's going to be a turnaround at some point. I don't know to what extent, but I think it's coming. And then Braylon Antunez, just very raw. We talked about him already, so I'm not going to go too in depth, but got tons of power, got very loud tools, and I think he's going to break out at some point.
Yeah, I am very much with you on Antunez. I think this is a really, really talented guy. Since it is our first time doing something like this, who are some underrated names in the system in your eyes?
Yeah, well, I just want to start with international talent. We touched on a lot of guys in the ACL and single A that it's not the organization that's just hitting on guys like Made and Churio. They're churning out like intriguing pieces at a pretty high clip. Obviously, most, if any even do, most aren't going to turn into those type of guys, but just the more sort of lottery tickets you have, the more likely you are to hit on some. And I've got no doubt in my mind that some of these guys are going to turn into big leaguers, whether it's Ortuño or Frias or the list goes on. So also, I just want to touch on Alexander Frias again. He's probably the guy in my mind that's rocketed up the list the most this year. Starting to get some attention, but I think there's a lot more to come. Like I said, I think he's going to be a top 50 prospect in the game next 2 years. Pedro Ibargüen is the guy that I was high on 2 years ago. Had a good pro debut in the DSL. Maybe it was 3 years ago now. And then first stateside season was just a nightmare. Although he still had like a 310 on base, even though his OPS was like under 500. So he's got legitimate tools there. He's carried it over from last year. So I think it's been nice seeing him kind of earn some more consistent at-bats after being like the fourth or fifth outfielder on Wilson's roster to start the year. Been one of the strongest offensive performers in the Warbirds lineup, at least coming into May for sure. I know some guys have started to heat up, but the trio of Juan Martinez, Moises Polanco, and Jonathan Rangel, we talked about them a lot. Very high risk, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Tyler Renz is a name we didn't touch on yet, but I've already got him just outside of the top 30 prospects in the system, and I'm putting him up there with Message, Noth, and Dubanewicz. How do you say it again? Dubanewicz. I always get it mixed up. But I put him right up there. I think he's got a lot of room for growth, and I'm excited to see where he goes. Had a couple nice outings recently. Mikaeus Mercedes sort of flies under the radar, just got healthy, came off the IL. He's got big-time stuff. The question for him is he going to be able to command it? And so far this year, it's been passable. I think he's performing a little bit better than his baseline numbers would suggest. But like I said, he's got a big arm, so I'm excited to see what develops there. And then three names that are repeating the DSL this year, but I think could be promoted to the ACL, are all pitchers, and they're all Garcias. So Gustavo, Danielle, and Derlene. They each flashed some interesting peripherals last year. but also we're outperforming some metrics. There's some walk concerns, but I'm excited to see if one or two or all three of them kind of take that next step forward and we see them stateside in the near future.
Yeah, Renz is a guy I'm very excited about. I think he's a velo jump away from really being a big time guy that just flies up the system rankings. Ibarguen definitely can hit, man. The defense and the base running is hard to watch with him at this point in his career. It's a mess. He's like a 50% base stealer. He's gotten picked off like 3 times while I've been watching, and I've also seen him drop 3 fly balls. He's got 4 errors in like 15 games in the outfield. So the bat is really interesting. He's going to have to find a way to impact the game somewhat from another way too, but like the bat is legit. It looks like one of the better at the level, like you said. So we'll have to see if he can figure out some of the other stuff. And then the last thing we'll talk about, DSL season will start on Monday, I believe, here. So anyone in particular you're going to be keeping an eye on for the DSL season?
Yeah, there's quite a few. I'll just kind of break it down into a couple different groupings, but obviously we've got the big names, the high international signings, Frontado, Monies, Rodriguez. Hopefully at least one of them emerges as the next kind of Made, or, to a lesser extent, at least like Frias or an interesting name. I'm sure we'll get one of those out of the 3 at least. And then the most fascinating for me is Moises Salazar, a catcher. Seems to be kind of like a Jefferson Caro. I think he's pretty mature behind the dish. Obviously, we need to see him in games, but I want to keep an eye on him. And then there's a couple of repeats that I want to watch, Herlin Payano and Yoanderson Terrasona. Both of them, Payano was a relatively significant international bonus. Terrasona was not, to my knowledge, but he performed last year. And then Payano was injured for the vast majority of his pro debut campaign last year. So hopefully he gets on the field healthy, and excited to see him perform. And then the last thing I had on there was just, I'm always interested to see kind of the pitching lottery, see who emerges. Cause like I said, they don't go after the big name international arms mostly. So yeah, we'll see who kind of emerges out of that group. And then the new signing, Manuel Davila, very interested. I'm kind of puzzling that the Padres let him go, especially considering the state of their minor league system. I think they would at least, give him some more time to figure things out, but it could be their loss. I'm excited to see what he's got. He's going to backtrack to the DSL, it looks like, to start the year. But he was in the ACL last year, and we could see him back up in the near future.
Yeah, I've had the chance to watch a couple of the extended spring DSL games, which I hate to admit, but I've watched a couple of them. And Diego Frontado really looks the part when I watch him. Like, that guy, he's very advanced for his level. And yeah, Salazar, when they signed him, was one of my, if I were going to rank them, he'd be my 3rd highest ranked player in the class, and he'd be pretty close to Ricky Monies. And then Jose Rodriguez would probably fall a little bit behind those 3. Yeah,
Agreed.
Payano's also looked very good in those games that I've watched. I've seen him pop some EVs of over 111, 112 a couple times, I think. So he's got some legit pop in the bat. So definitely looking forward. I would agree with all of those names. I think those are all very good ones to watch. And then the only pitcher I'll add specifically is Alexander Mercedes. I think that's a really interesting arm from the left side that I've seen into the mid 90s already at 17 years old, and just one I'll be keeping an eye on. I don't know what the walks will look like. That's the one thing I don't really know where the command's going to be, but I think the stuff is going to play pretty well for him. So we got one last thing. We got one listener question on Hayden Robinson from Andrew, who asked, I noticed Hayden Robinson was recently promoted to Wilson. His numbers seem quite bad since coming back from Tommy John before the injury. From the videos, his stuff looked really good, especially off speed. Haven't heard much of anything from him since the injury. Thoughts on that? So I'll let you take that one first. I don't know if you have anything on Robinson.
Yeah, prior to the injury, he was one of the best surprises in his pro debut. He was knocking on the door of top 30 prospects for me, and then obviously dealt with the injury, coming back, and just has not looked the same, unfortunately. So my concern level is fairly high because there really isn't much going right for him at this point. But it is a good sign. I think the organization wouldn't be sending him to full season ball if they didn't, have some confidence in where he's at. So hopefully, we see him and he takes that next step with Wilson, because it's been a tough year or two for him.
Yeah, looking at some of the actual pitch tracking data that we got when he was in the ACL, the velo had reportedly jumped up a little bit last year. It doesn't seem like it's really held this year, so it's kind of in the low 90s. All the shapes are okay. Like, it's decent breaking ball shape. It's decent changeup shape. I would say velo-wise, it's pretty good, but the fastball seems pretty hittable, and it does get hard to work around that when you're, trying to land everything as off speeds for strikes. That can be difficult. So we'll see if he can add a little velo, maybe fix some of the shapes just a little bit. It's not the easiest thing to do, but I like the secondaries. We'll just have to see if the command and the fastball can play well enough. But I think we gave people enough content here in 2.5 hours. So, Alex, thank you so much for joining me, and apologies if we went way over time. I don't really know if you had any time limit on this, but yeah, thanks for doing this. If you have anything you want to, like you said, if you want to talk about the account anymore or anything else you want to push here, but we should be back doing these at least a couple more times throughout the season.
No, yeah, just thank you for having me. I think next time maybe I'll talk a little bit more about my account, because I don't know if I gave a good idea of what exactly my account all entails. But no, first thing I just wanted to say is Jayden Dubanewicz. I know your name. It was just a lot of names we were going through, so he might listen to this. He may very well. So I wanted to make sure that I do know his name. It was just a lot of stuff we were going through. So. But no, I just want to thank you for the opportunity, Spencer. It's been great being on here, and I could talk this stuff all day. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Same here. I mean, we can talk about the account more next time, but for those of you who aren't following or haven't at least checked it out on Instagram, go check it out at BrewersFarm. And then at Twitter, I believe it's at the BrewersFarm. Is that correct?
At the BrewersFarm, yeah. Or at BrewersFarm. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. Is that on Twitter? I for some reason I thought it was separate or is different on Twitter. It doesn't matter. You'll find it by searching Brewers Farm.
Yep, it's the Brewers Farm on X. On Instagram, it's just Brewers Farm.
Okay. Yep. So yeah, definitely go check it out. Like he said, like we've talked about, there's a ton of great content coming out. There will be Pitcher of the Month, Player of the Month awards coming out soon, and there's always a Player of the Day and a lot of stuff to follow along with. And any new signing, anything, any releases, anything, like, it's all there. So definitely give it a follow. And like I said, we will be back again. I'm guessing it won't quite go this long next time, since we'll only have 1 month or a little bit less to talk about, but we'll find out. I'm not promising anything. When I'm involved, it always goes long. And I think anyone who listens knows that at this point. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back at some point in the relatively near future.